Hey guys, tonight we're drifting into one of the strangest eras Rome ever produced, a time so chaotic it makes modern office politics look like a kindergarten birthday party. We're talking 270 AD, the year Rome basically woke up, checked its calendar, and realized everything was on fire. The borders were collapsing. The treasury was emptier than your fridge at 2 a.m. The army was overworked, underpaid, and one sneeze away from quitting. And the emperors, they were dying faster than you can switch TV channels. Into this absolute disaster waddles a man history forgets. Aurelian, a guy so competent the empire actually stopped falling apart for 5 whole minutes. Tonight, we're diving into the life of the emperor who duct-taped the Roman world back together using grit, charisma, and what was probably a permanently exhausted expression. Before we begin, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy falling asleep to mildly unhinged historical storytelling. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. Somehow everyone is always watching these at 11:43 p.m. while avoiding responsibilities. Now, dim the lights, turn on a fan, for that soft white noise. Get comfortable. Tuck your feet under the blanket so the imaginary Roman rats, which were statistically huge, don't nibble your toes. And now, let's ask some questions, the important questions. What did it actually feel like to live under an emperor who kept winning battles before breakfast? How does one reunite an empire held together with vibes and hope? Did Roman soldiers really eat that much garlic? And how did anyone survive sitting next to them? What does your daily routine look like when half the provinces are rebelling and the other half are pretending they're independent countries? And perhaps most importantly, would you survive a day in the crisis of the 3rd century without crying into your tunic? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 270 AD, the moment the Roman Empire starts to fall apart, and the moment one exhausted, overqualified emperor begins to put it back together. Good luck, you'll need it. You wake up in a wooden barracks that smells like sweat, smoke, and the faint aroma of someone cooking onions at an hour no sane person chooses. Outside, soldiers mutter about rebellions popping up like weeds, and the empire feels like it's being held together by frayed rope and denial. It's early, too early, the kind of pre-dawn gloom where even the sun seems unsure if it wants to clock in today. Your straw mattress has imprinted a permanent map of the empire on your back, complete with every border crisis dug into your spine. You sit up slowly, joints cracking like distant catapults, and take your first breath of the morning. It tastes smoky, oniony, faintly sad, the signature scent of the Roman military. Oh, the existential crisis. Around you, the other soldiers rise in the same sluggish, synchronized misery. Not one of you is a morning person. Not one of you understands why onions are being cooked before sunrise. Not one of you has had a full night of sleep since the empire decided to fall apart like overcooked bread. You step outside the barracks and immediately regret it. The air is cold, damp, and filled with the sound of whispered panic, the kind of half-muttered fear that soldiers use when they're trying not to admit things are going badly. Everywhere you look, men are polishing armor, tightening belts, sharpening swords, and pretending they don't hear the word rebellion bouncing around the camp like a loose chicken. One soldier near the fire rubs his temples and mutters, "Another province declared independence. I can't keep track." Another just shrugs and says, "I think that makes 5, 6? I don't know. Everything is a blur." A third is poking the onion pot like it personally betrayed him. You start to piece it together. The empire isn't just struggling, it's spiraling, hard. The crisis of the 3rd century is in full swing, though nobody calls it that yet. To you it's just Tuesday. A Tuesday filled with border invasions, economic collapse, plague hangovers, Gothic raids, usurpers popping up like mushrooms, and emperors dying so quickly you're not confident you remember the current one's name. You try to think back. Was it Claudius Gothicus, Gallienus, some guy who ruled for 11 minutes? Hard to say. The emperors at this point are like seasonal interns, in and out before you learn their names. All you know is that Rome feels more fragile than a clay cup left in the sun. One strong breeze, and the whole thing might just snap. You shuffle toward the campfire, hands extended for warmth. The heat isn't comforting, it's desperate, like the fire itself is fighting for survival. The onion cook nods at you, ladles something unidentifiable into a bowl, and hands it to you without making eye contact. This is normal. Eye contact leads to conversation. Conversation leads to acknowledging the state of the empire. Nobody has the emotional bandwidth for that. You sit on a log, blow on the mystery stew, and listen to more soldier chatter. The Goths crossed again. No way. And the provinces? Still rebelling. And the economy? What economy? Someone nearby sighs so deeply, It sounds like it came from their ancestors. Your mind drifts for a moment. You think back to the stories of Rome's golden age, emperors with marble baths, legions with gleaming armor, citizens eating figs in sunlit courtyards, while poets recited flowery nonsense. None of that feels real anymore. Instead, Rome feels like a giant, rusty machine. Everyone forgot how to operate. The irony, people still expect you, yes, you, to help keep it running. You finish your stew, it was 80% onion, 20% despair, and stand as the morning bell clangs. The sound is so loud it rattles your ribs. Soldiers snap into motion, grabbing shields, fastening sandals, and rushing into formation with the enthusiasm of wet laundry. Your centurion stomps past, barking orders with the intensity of someone who didn't sleep and will take it out on everyone. Behind him, two recruits struggle to lift a supply crate. One drops his end, and the crate bursts open, spilling spearheads everywhere. Everyone collectively sighs. Disaster everywhere. Even gravity is rebelling. As the troops assemble, you overhear a fresh rumor swirling through the ranks. There's a new emperor, a good one. The words hit you like a warm breeze. A good emperor? In this economy? Impossible. But the rumor spreads fast. Whispers leap from soldier to soldier. Aurelian, a man with experience, a man who's actually competent, a man who supposedly once killed an enemy warrior by punching him through his armor, which sounds fake but morale-boosting, so nobody questions it. The centurion finally reaches you, squints at your face, and says, "Today we move fast. Aurelian wants everyone ready." His tone is sharp, but behind it, there's something strange, something you haven't heard in a while. Hope. As you march through the brittle morning light, you feel the shift. Yes, everything is chaotic. Yes, the empire is still a flaming amphora, rolling downhill. Yes, there are more rebellions than socks in the barracks. But the camp feels different, steadier, focused. And in that moment, marching past tents, fires, muttering soldiers, and the lingering stink of breakfast onions, you realize something extraordinary. Rome may be a dumpster fire, but someone finally showed up with a bucket of water. Aurelian strides past you, tall, weathered, and radiating the energy of a man who has seen way too much nonsense for one lifetime. His eyes say, "Yes, the empire is collapsing. No, he does not have time for it, thank you." He moves like a storm cloud, wearing sandals, dark, determined, unstoppable. The kind of man who could punch a tax problem into submission. The soldiers around you tense automatically as he approaches, not out of fear, but out of instinct, the same way woodland animals go silent when a predator strolls through the clearing. Aurelian has that effect. He is not a man. He is a force of nature, wrapped in a cloak that's definitely seen better centuries. Up close, you notice the details. The scar on his cheek, the faint purple bags under his eyes, the tightly controlled posture of a man always 2 steps away from a nervous breakdown, but too disciplined to let it happen. His armor is practical, not decorative. His boots are dusty, not polished. This is not an emperor who lounges on velvet cushions eating grapes. This is an emperor who wakes up at 4 a.m. to yell at incompetent governors. He doesn't even look at you long enough for a proper acknowledgement, just a sharp nod, the kind that says, "I will save your empire, but please, for the love of Jupiter, do not bother me." You've heard rumors, of course. Everyone has. That Aurelian once cut down 40 enemies in one battle. Though, depending on who tells the story, the number ranges from 40 to 400 to basically an entire village. You've heard he trains his soldiers harder than anyone else, that he doesn't tolerate laziness, that he once retired a whole cohort because they march too slowly. You've also heard, whispered in the corners of smoky barracks, that he is the only person standing between Rome and total collapse. Standing here now, seeing him in motion, you believe all of it. He walks with urgency, the pace of someone who has 3 rebellions, 2 invasions, and 1 diplomatic disaster scheduled before lunch. Behind him, a cluster of officers jogs awkwardly to keep up. One trips on a tent peg and almost eats dirt, but Aurelian doesn't even turn around. He doesn't break stride. If gravity itself disobeyed him, he'd march right past it too. Your centurion elbows you lightly and murmurs, "That's the man who's going to fix this mess." You glance at Aurelian again. He looks like he'd rather be wrestling a bear than dealing with another provincial governor, which, in fairness, might be easier. As Aurelian heads toward the command tent, you and the other soldiers pretend not to stare. But you absolutely do. Everyone does. There's an electricity in the air, a hum of something unfamiliar. Competence. It's intoxicating. The last several emperors were, let's say, variations of disappointing. Some were incompetent, some were unlucky, some were corrupt, and some were so forgettable that historians probably misfiled them under miscellaneous. But Aurelian? He has a presence that makes you stand a little straighter without knowing why. You watch him stop abruptly to correct 2 legionaries, adjusting a siege engine incorrectly. He doesn't shout, he doesn't snap, he just tells them calmly and confidently that they're about to fire a rock directly into their own tent. They look at the mechanism, realize he's right, and turn a remarkable shade of pale. Aurelian moves on. You realize something else. He's everywhere. One moment he's inspecting the cavalry, then he's reviewing supply carts. Then he's testing the sharpness of a random soldier's sword like a disappointed blacksmith. You're not sure he even stopped for breakfast. You doubt he knows what breakfast is anymore. Eventually, word passes through the ranks that Aurelian wants all troops assembled for a speech. You gather in a wide, dusty field, shields glinting in the morning sun, breath held in anticipation. Aurelian steps up onto a raised platform, windswept and severe. The camp falls silent. When he speaks, it's not dramatic, it's not poetic, it's practical. The entire empire is fracturing, barbarians crossing borders, usurpers declaring fake kingdoms, the economy crumbling like stale bread, Rome itself losing faith, and Aurelian doesn't sugarcoat any of it. He tells you the truth. The crisis is real, the danger is real, and if something doesn't change, Rome, the Rome that conquered continents, will be nothing but a story whispered in taverns. Then he says the words that hit you like a javelin to the chest. But we will restore it. No flourish, no theatrics, just certainty. You feel the shift ripple through the ranks, shoulders square, heads lift, men who haven't smiled since the last plague crack hesitant grins. Suddenly, the impossible doesn't feel so impossible, because when a man like Aurelian says something, you believe him. After the speech, he steps down and walks straight past you again, focused, steady, already thinking 3 campaigns ahead. You watch him go, feeling strangely grounded. If Rome is a drowning man, Aurelian is the hand pulling it back to the surface. As the camp dissolves into busy motion, your centurion claps your shoulder and says, "Welcome to Aurelian's army. Try not to die." You nod. Reasonable advice. Because one thing is suddenly clear. The emperor may be exhausted, perpetually annoyed, and running on nothing but stubbornness and boiled grain. But he's the best chance the empire has had in decades. And now somehow, you're part of his mission to save the world's biggest fixer-upper. Your day begins with the most Roman of meals. Bread so stale you could use it as a weapon, olives with the enthusiasm cooked out of them, and wine that tastes like sadness. Nobody complains. Complaining is for people with hope. You stare down at the tragic little assortment on your wooden plate, wondering if there's a word in Latin for culinary despair. The bread is the real offender. You try to break it using your hands, then your knee, then the edge of the table. Nothing. If anything, the bread seems to be winning. You finally admit defeat and bite into it directly, only to feel your teeth vibrate in protest. If this loaf survives the fall of the empire, archaeologists could easily mistake it for a paving stone. You glance around. Everyone else seems to be experiencing similar disappointment. A soldier to your left holds his piece of bread at arm's length and squints at it like he's trying to determine if it's actually edible or if he's about to consume a minor artifact. Another, dunking his bread into his wine, a beverage somehow both sour and watery, mutters, "Softens it," right before nearly cracking a molar. The olives don't help your mood either. They're shriveled, wrinkled, and coated in an oil so pungent it feels like it's judging your life choices. When you pop one into your mouth, it tastes like someone whispered the concept of flavor from across the room, but didn't commit to it. You chew slowly, trying not to think about the luxuries people supposedly enjoyed in Rome's golden age. Feasts, figs, honey cakes, basically anything that doesn't double as battlefield equipment. And then, of course, there's the wine. The Romans will happily tell you their wine is the best in the world, but what sits in your cup tastes like someone fermented disappointment. It's sharp, acidic, and leaves an aftertaste that suggests you've licked a wooden barrel that's been left in the rain. The man beside you swirls his cup, sniffs it dramatically, and says, "Hints of vinegar? Wet leather? Regret?" You give him a solemn nod. All 3. Despite the questionable breakfast, everyone eats in relative silence. Nobody has the emotional energy to rage against the bread. Normally, soldiers complain about everything. Marching too far, marching not far enough. The weather, the tents, the commanders, each other. But in the crisis of the 3rd century, complaining has become a luxury. There's only so much oxygen you can waste while the empire collapses like a flan in the sun. You take another sip of wine that isn't wine and scan the camp. Someone is sharpening their sword using the edge of their shield, sending sparks flying dangerously close to the breakfast area. Another is trying to convince a friend that the rumor about the emperor being assassinated again is false. A group of recruits sits huddled together, eating their olives like they're performing a punishment ritual. The sun has barely risen, yet the air already carries the unmistakable tension of a military camp on the brink of something big. You can feel it in the way men sit upright, the way they keep their gear close, the way conversations dip every time someone mentions the Goths or the breakaway provinces. This isn't an ordinary morning. This is crisis breakfast. No one enjoys crisis breakfast. You tear another bite of bread, or try to, and your mind drifts. You think about how Romans in the provinces live. Do they also eat weapon-grade loaves? Do their olives also taste like deflated disappointment balloons? Do they drink this same emotional support wine? Probably. Times are rough all over. And yet in the middle of all this bleakness, there's a strange kind of comfort in routine. Breakfast may be terrible, but it's consistent, familiar, a moment of predictability in a world that feels like it's one bad afternoon away from total implosion. The bread may be a hazard, the olives sad, and the wine worse, but at least they're here. You know what you're getting. As you chew through your final bite of bread, your jaw may never forgive you for this. A horn sounds in the distance. It's not the panicked horn of an attack, thank the gods, but the everyday horn of get moving, time to assemble, time to prepare, time to pretend the empire isn't falling apart while you digest olives the size of marbles. You down the last sip of wine and immediately regret it. The aftertaste hits like a philosophical crisis and stand from the bench with a sigh. Breakfast is done. Your stomach is confused. Your mouth is offended. Your spirit is numb. You and the other soldiers shuffle out of the dining area, adjusting helmets, tightening belts, stretching arms, and praying silently to whichever deity oversees digestion. The man who'd been sniffing his wine earlier swears he can feel it dissolving the lining of his esophagus. You pat him on the back, sympathetically. It's too early for medical emergencies. As you walk toward the parade ground, you overhear a group discussing rumors about Aurelian again, the new emperor who supposedly doesn't sleep, eats nails for protein, and has single-handedly punched the economy back into order. You're skeptical, but after this breakfast, you're willing to believe anyone with that kind of energy exists. Your centurion intercepts you, shouting for everyone to hurry up. You fall into formation, still chewing a stubborn piece of bread that has somehow survived your attempts to swallow it. You're pretty sure it'll be in your stomach until winter. But you're awake now, fueled, in a loose, interpretive sense, by Rome's finest crisis cuisine, and as you stand shoulder to shoulder with your fellow soldiers, sun rising over a world that keeps daring you to give up, you realize breakfast may be miserable, but you have survived it, and in the 3rd century survival counts as a win. The Roman army around you is tough, loyal, and aggressively fragrant. Garlic is their performance-enhancing drug of choice, and you immediately regret standing so close. But they adore Aurelian, which is good because you're going wherever he points. You inhale cautiously, which is a mistake. The air is a thick, swirling cloud of sweat, leather, steel, and garlic. So much garlic, a criminal amount of garlic, enough garlic to ward off every barbarian within a 3-mile radius, or at least make them rethink their life choices. The men swear it keeps them healthy, strong, and protected from evil spirits. You're pretty sure it's protecting you from the concept of breathing. But this is a Roman legion, a living, stomping, shouting machine made of men who have seen more chaos than your average modern office worker on a Monday morning. They smell like battlefields, unwashed tunics, old campfires, and determination. They are loud, they are proud, they are bonded through a shared cocktail of exhaustion, trauma, and unspoken emotional neglect. You stand among them, adjusting your gear, feeling the vibration of hundreds of sandals striking the ground, the clatter of armor, the rhythmic jingles of buckles and scabbards. The entire camp churns with motion, energy, and a kind of grim camaraderie. The "we're all doomed, but we're doomed together" kind of vibe. A soldier to your left slaps your back so hard, you momentarily forget your own name. "Big march today," he says cheerfully, chewing garlic like it's a dessert. You nod, trying not to breathe in his direction. "So I've heard. Stick close. Aurelian moves fast." He grins. His teeth are coated with garlic pulp. You see your life flash before your eyes. The thing about the Roman army is that it functions best when times are worst. And right now, times could not be worse. The empire is fracturing. Enemies attack from every direction. The economy is flailing. Morale is one bad day away from mutiny. Yet the soldiers don't break. They've been trained to survive unimaginable conditions. Blistering heat, freezing nights, plagues, raids, and the general despair of being alive in the 3rd century. They march through mud, sand, snow, and political turmoil without blinking. They can erect a fort in a single night, cook a meal over a campfire, patch a wounded comrade, and still find the energy to bicker over who stole whose sandals. The trauma bonding is real. Every soldier has a story. The time he survived a battle by pretending to be dead for 2 hours. The night he killed 2 bandits with a cooking pot, the day he watched an emperor get assassinated and then had to immediately follow a new one before lunch. These experiences weld men together far more effectively than team-building exercises with trust falls. You take a moment to study them. The veterans have that 1,000-yard stare, not blank, but calculating, always assessing threats, analyzing terrain, predicting chaos before it arrives. The newcomers, they look nervous, pale, and deeply confused about the aroma situation, but they'll toughen up. They always do. And then there's Aurelian. You hear him before you see him, not because he's loud, but because the Legion reacts as one. Spines straighten, conversations stop mid-sentence. Someone drops a shield with a panicked clatter. Aurelian walks through the ranks with the calm intensity of a man who can spot laziness from 100 paces. He inspects soldiers the way an artisan inspects tools, checking for cracks, testing edges, ensuring reliability. He notices everything: the worn strap on a shield, the dullness of a sword, the frayed stitching of a sandal, and he corrects it all immediately. "You," he says, pointing at a legionary whose armor strap is loose. "Fix it before it gets you killed." "You," he says to another, "sharpen that." "And you," he says to a third soldier who is casually eating garlic cloves like grapes, "maybe fewer of those." The crowd laughs quietly. Aurelian does not. But the admiration is unmistakable. The army loves him, not because he's warm or friendly or charismatic, but because he works harder than any of them. He doesn't ask the impossible. He does the impossible and expects them to keep up. He leads from the front. He fights with them. He sleeps on the ground with them. And he holds the empire on his shoulders like it's just another shield. You've seen commanders who hide in tents, governors who panic at the first hint of trouble, and emperors who run away faster than startled deer. Aurelian is none of those things. He's carved from iron, wrapped in discipline, fueled by sheer willpower. And the army, they'd follow him into the sun, literally, if necessary. The signal horn blares, long and low. The legion immediately snaps into formation, shields up, spears collected, packs secured. The ground trembles under synchronized footsteps as the men align themselves with military precision. You fall into place among them, the heat of bodies pressing close, the scent of garlic assaulting your senses. Someone behind you whispers, "This is going to be a rough one." Someone else replies, "Everything's a rough one." The legion begins to march, slow at first, then faster still. Aurelian, at the front, sets a pace that can best be described as vengeful jogging. You struggle to keep up. Your lungs burn, your legs ache. The garlic fumes behind you could incapacitate a small mammal. But the army presses on, unwavering. The dust rises around you in thick clouds. The sun climbs higher, baking your helmet like a personal oven. Sweat trickles down your back, pooling in the least comfortable places. This is fine, you lie to yourself. Everything is fine. Hours pass, miles disappear behind you. The legion moves as one unstoppable tide. And then, somewhere between exhaustion and dehydration, you realize something unsettling. You're starting to match their stride. You're starting to endure the smell. You're starting to think like them. You are becoming a Roman soldier, powered by garlic, steeled by sweat, held together by trauma, and following an emperor who refuses to let Rome fall. Word spreads. The empire is fractured into 3 pieces like a dropped ceramic bowl. The west went rogue, the east went freelance, and the central bit is clinging on like a cat on a curtain. Aurelian decides he is not having it. You hear the news the same way all Roman soldiers hear life-altering information, from a sweaty messenger who sprints into camp looking like he's been chased by wolves, shouts something dramatic, then collapses into a heap. He gasps out the details between wheezes. Rome isn't just in trouble, it's actively disintegrating. Pieces have broken off. Whole territories have said, "Actually, we're independent now, thanks," and walked out like teenagers slamming the door after an argument. The Gallic Empire in the West? Gone. They've decided they don't need Rome, thank you very much. They've got their own emperor, their own military, and, rumor has it, marginally better beer. The Palmyrene Empire in the East? Also gone. Zenobia, queen extraordinaire, scholar, diplomat, and all-around icon, has taken over the richest provinces and is ruling them with grace, intellect, and the energy of someone who's absolutely done taking orders from Rome. And the middle chunk, the part you're currently standing in, is overstretched, underfunded, and held together by Aurelian's raw willpower and the aroma of garlic from the previous segment. It all feels surreal. You grew up hearing about the glory of Rome, the empire that tamed seas, conquered continents, and made everyone learn Latin whether they wanted to or not. But standing here now, staring at the messenger who's still trying to catch his breath, you realize the great and mighty Rome currently looks like someone's group project that fell apart because half the participants stopped showing up. A soldier behind you mutters, "3 empires! Since when do we have 3? Another answers, since Thursday, apparently. Nobody knows exactly when everything split, because information travels slower than a donkey with back problems. But everyone knows one thing. Aurelian is absolutely furious. You can feel his frustration radiating from the command tent like heat from a forge. When he emerges, he's composed. Too composed. The dangerous kind of composed. The kind of composed that means someone is about to make very large, very risky decisions. He gathers the troops. The entire camp falls silent. Even the garlic chewers stop chewing. The Empire will be reunited, Aurelian says, in a tone so flat and serious you feel your hair stand up. All of it. He says it like it's the most obvious thing in the world. Like reassembling a shattered superstate is the ancient equivalent of sweeping the kitchen. Like the Gallic Empire and the Palmyrene Empire are just naughty puppies who wandered off and will come back when called. You shift your weight uneasily. Reuniting the empire sounds ambitious, the kind of ambition that results in either glory or a very short obituary. But Aurelian doesn't hesitate. He doesn't pace. He doesn't rant. He simply stares at the horizon with the expression of a man who has already planned 200 moves ahead on a cosmic chessboard. The soldiers whisper excitedly. Is he serious? He's always serious. We're really going to fight them? Probably all of them. This guy does not rest. You start walking through camp as the conversations buzz around you. Everywhere you look, you see the same mixture of disbelief and adrenaline. Some soldiers sharpen their swords, muttering battle prayers. Others grumble about their aching knees. One man is trying to explain the political situation with sticks in the dirt, but he keeps forgetting which stick represents which breakaway state. So now the diagram just looks like a confused chicken claw. The idea of Rome splitting into 3 would almost be funny if it weren't so catastrophic. It's like watching your favorite bakery suddenly announce, "Hi, we're not one bakery anymore. We're 3 bakeries now. One sells normal bread. One sells only exotic pastries. One refuses to serve anyone, but also hasn't changed the sign. And you're the poor employee who has to fix it." As you move toward the training field, you overhear officers talking strategy. The East is wealthy and fortified. Will need diplomacy or overwhelming force. The West is militarized but unstable. They might fold once we pressure them. The center must stay strong or everything collapses. It's like listening to people plan an elaborate wedding seating arrangement while also preparing for a bar fight. Aurelian, meanwhile, seems almost energized. You see him stride past again, checking maps, issuing orders, scanning the horizon like he expects the entire empire to reassemble itself out of fear of disappointing him. To him, the split isn't acceptable, not negotiable, not permanent. It is a temporary inconvenience, and he treats it that way. That night, sitting around the campfire with your fellow soldiers, you try to make sense of it all. The flames flicker, casting orange light on exhausted faces. The men talk quietly, not the rowdy late-night chatter of normal evenings, but thoughtful murmurs. Do you think we can really do it? Aurelian can, but can we? That's a problem for future us. You stare into the flames, the magnitude of it all settling into your bones. You're part of an army whose emperor plans to march across continents, take on 2 separate empires, defeat multiple rebellions, reorganize the world's largest military, stabilize the economy, secure the borders, and rebuild Rome's reputation, all in the middle of a crisis that would make any normal person crawl under a blanket and never come out. But here's the twist. You believe he can do it. Somehow, against all logic, you believe. Because Aurelian doesn't see 3 empires. He sees one empire temporarily suffering from bad decisions, and he's coming for every last piece. Aurelian marches so fast, you begin questioning whether he sleeps or merely powers down. The roads blur beneath your sandals, and every stop blends into the next. Dust, orders, shields, more marching, repeat. From the moment you leave camp that morning, you discover that Aurelian's concept of walking is a cruel lie. Walking implies a leisurely pace, maybe a chance to admire the landscape or adjust your tunic without risking death. But Aurelian marches like he's late for every appointment in his life at the same time. He moves with purpose, intensity, and zero respect for the limitations of human joints. You try to keep up, but within minutes your legs feel like overcooked noodles. The pace is blistering, the kind of pace that makes you reevaluate all your life choices, including the choice to join the Roman army, the choice to wake up this morning, and the choice to possess legs at all. Every so often Aurelian turns around to make sure the army is still behind him. His expression never changes, but his eyes clearly say, "Why are you all so slow?" And you want to shout back, "We are mortals. We have bones. They are fragile." But you say nothing, because the man scares you more than death itself. The road stretches endlessly in front of you, a chalky ribbon cutting through fields, forests, and hills. Dust rises in thick clouds with every synchronized step. It settles on your skin, fills your mouth, coats your clothes, and gives everything a light, gritty crunch. You blink, and more dust enters your eyes. You cough, and dust comes out. You sneeze, and dust sneezes with you. Your armor clinks rhythmically as you go, the metal plates smacking against your ribs like they too disapprove of this pace. Your shield digs into your arm, your sandals rub your heels raw, sweat trickles down your back, soaking into the fabric until it weighs twice as much as it did this morning. The smell? Absolutely catastrophic. Garlic, leather, dust, despair. It's all there, swirling around you like a cursed perfume. Around you, the Legion grumbles in harmony. Does he ever slow down? Not once. I heard he marched from the Danube to Rome in 3 days. That's not physically possible. Neither is this march, and yet we're doing it. You pass milestone after milestone on the road, literal reminders from the gods that you are in fact moving forward. But it doesn't feel like progress. It feels like you're stuck in a loop. March, stop briefly, march more. Listen to orders, march further, cry internally, march again. Occasionally, Aurelian calls for a rest stop, but his definition of rest is questionable at best. You collapse onto the ground, heart pounding, lungs screaming, legs trembling. But before you've even finished one good breath, Aurelian is already giving instructions, inspecting equipment, reorganizing units, and personally correcting the posture of anyone who dared slouch. Then the horn sounds again, the dreaded all clear for everyone, stand up now, so Aurelian doesn't find you horizontal, and you drag your aching body back to your feet. The countryside changes slowly around you. You pass through forests thick enough to swallow sound, through rolling hills dotted with sheep who watch you pass with quiet judgment, through small villages where residents step out of their homes to stare in awe at the massive Roman war machine streaming past. Children wave, farmers gape, old women cross themselves, either in blessing or in solidarity for your upcoming blisters. And always, always Aurelian leads the way. He never looks tired, never falls behind, never even wipes sweat from his brow. It's as if he's powered by sheer stubbornness and political fury. You imagine that if the sun itself got in his way, he'd scold it for being too slow and demand it rise faster. By midday, your legs feel like they are filled with molten iron. Your shoulders ache. Your pack seems heavier than any known material on Earth, possibly denser than lead, possibly handcrafted by disgruntled gods. But the march continues. You settle into the rhythm of it. One foot forward, then the other. Breathe. Don't collapse. Don't die. Don't let Aurelian see you falter. The Legion, despite its exhaustion, moves with unity. Men sing marching songs, some inspirational, some completely absurd. One soldier behind you starts chanting, left, right, who needs knees? They're overrated. Another adds, my sandals are filing a complaint. Your centurion overhears and snaps, keep singing if it helps, but keep marching. By late afternoon, the sun begins its slow descent. Shadows stretch long across the road. The heat finally loosens its grip. You think, foolishly, that perhaps Aurelian will stop soon. He does not. He keeps going, until the sky turns orange, then pink, then purple. Only when the first stars flicker overhead does he finally slow. You feel your soul returning to your body. Camp is set up with mechanical efficiency. Fires spark to life. Tents rise. Shields form neat stacks. The cooks begin preparing the daily ration of things boiled in other things. You drop onto a crate near the fire, feeling every inch of your existence. Your feet throb, your calves scream, your spine is reconsidering its role in your life. A veteran next to you laughs and says, you survived your first Aurelian march. Not bad. You smile weakly. You're too tired to form actual words. You take a sip of lukewarm water and close your eyes, feeling the ground sway beneath you like your body still thinks it's moving. Then, because Aurelian is incapable of letting people rest for more than 3 minutes, he walks through the camp once more. He praises the speed of the march. He notes improvements the army must make tomorrow. He announces that the pace will increase. You and every soldier nearby silently scream. But as he leaves, lantern light casting long shadows behind him, you can't help feeling awe, exhaustion mixed with admiration, because this man, this relentless, unstoppable, iron-willed human storm, is marching not for glory, not for ego, but to save an empire collapsing under its own weight. And somehow, impossibly, marching behind him, you start to believe he might actually pull it off. The Goths sweep across the Danube like a thunderstorm wearing fur cloaks. Their arrival is loud, terrifying, and full of shouting. You grip your shield so tightly it squeaks. You'd heard stories, of course, everyone has. Tales whispered around campfires about the Goths, towering warriors with long hair, impressive beards, thick cloaks, and a fondness for yelling loud enough to wake the dead. Rumors said they were unstoppable, fearless, and immune to garlic, which frankly is the most horrifying part. But stories are one thing. Seeing them pour across the Danube in real time is an entirely new experience, the kind that makes your stomach fall straight into your sandals. The river itself seems startled. Mist rises off the rushing water as hundreds, no, thousands, of Gothic warriors surge across the shallows, splashing, shouting, clanging weapons against shields. Their battle cries roll across the water like a drum beat from some angry northern storm god. The sound travels through the ground, straight into your bones. You take a deep breath and immediately regret it because your mouth goes dry the moment you exhale. Your shield trembles under your grip, the wood squeaking like it's equally nervous. You silently beg it not to betray you by snapping in half. Around you, the Roman line shifts uneasily. Veterans tighten their grips. New recruits swallow loudly enough to be heard over the din. Your centurion barks orders left and right, voice sharp and clipped and desperately trying to cover the emotion known as "this is bad." You manage to tear your eyes from the horizon long enough to glance at Aurelian. He is calm, absolutely, terrifyingly calm. While everyone else is considering writing their wills, Aurelian watches the approaching wave with the same expression he gives irregular tax collectors, mild annoyance mixed with impending violence. He steps forward, shouting a command. The line shifts instantly. Shields locking together, spears angled, formations tightening. You snap into place, shoulder pressed to the soldier beside you, trying not to think about the fact that your life may now depend on your neighbor's garlic-infused courage. The Goths hit the riverbank like a living avalanche. Their shields are wooden and battered. Their axes gleam. Their hair blows wildly in the cold wind. Long, dramatic locks that make you briefly resent the Roman military hairstyle policy. Their war paint streaks across cheeks and brows. They look like they were carved out of a forest, and they are running directly toward you. The first impact is disorienting. Shields slam, spears jab, axes crash. The noise is unbearable. Metal on metal, wood splintering, men shouting, boots scrabbling in the mud. The force of it pushes you backward a step before the soldier on your right shoves you forward again with the subtle encouragement of someone who prefers not to die that day. "Hold!" your centurion screams. "Hold!" Aurelian roars, and somehow, impossibly, you do. The front line heaves like a living thing. Your arm burns under the weight of your shield. You stab when you can, push when you must, brace when the Goths charge again. Their raw strength is terrifying. Every blow rattles you all the way to your skull. A giant Gothic warrior smashes his shield against yours with enough force to make you see stars. He snarls something in his language, probably unkind, and raises his axe. You narrowly duck, the blade passing above your helmet with a whoosh that smells like angry fur cloak. Then Aurelian appears. He strides along the line like he owns the place, which technically he does, and rallies the men with nothing more than his presence. He shouts commands, strikes enemies, and reinforces the formation wherever it wavers. The Goths take notice. They focus on him. They charge harder. Aurelian does not budge. You witness him knock a Gothic warrior off his feet with a shield bash that would have launched a smaller man into orbit. Another swings an axe at him. Aurelian dodges with a movement far too elegant for someone who looks permanently exhausted. He counter-strikes with brutal precision. The legion roars. Morale skyrockets. You, on the other hand, are having the worst cardio workout of your life. The battle rages on in chaotic bursts, surges, retreats, screams, clanging metal, splashing mud. You lose track of time. Minutes feel like hours. Your arms feel like clay. Your legs shake. Sweat stings your eyes. Your breathing turns into a series of panicked wheezes. But slowly, agonizingly slowly, the tide begins to turn. The Gothic line falters. Their charges weaken. Aurelian's men press harder. Every step forward feels monumental, like pushing a mountain. But you do it, one shove at a time, one desperate breath at a time. The Goths begin to fall back toward the river. Not in a full retreat yet. They're too proud for that, but the momentum is shifting. Aurelian signals the cavalry, and they thunder forward on horseback, smashing into the Gothic flanks with brutal efficiency. Dust rises, horses scream, the battlefield erupts into layered chaos. You push once more, shield first, as the man who tried to decapitate you earlier slips in the mud and goes down. You don't hesitate. Training kicks in. So does fear. So does adrenaline. One strike, another. Done. You don't cheer. You don't breathe. You don't even think. But when you next look up, the riverbank is clearing. The Gothic warriors, seeing the cavalry charging again, begin pulling back. The thunder fades. The shouting lessens. The adrenaline, that has been pouring through your body finally crashes to a halt, leaving you shaky and hollow. The ground around you is a mess: trampled mud, broken shields, fallen spears. The air smells like smoke, sweat, and the metallic tang of iron. The river flows on, indifferent to the carnage on its shores. You collapse to one knee, shield still in hand, breathing like someone who just sprinted across the entire empire. Your heart feels like it's trying to escape your ribcage. A soldier beside you pats your back, wheezing, "Welcome to the frontier." You look at Aurelian. He stands tall, surveying the battlefield, eyes still fierce, no doubt, no hesitation, just focus. He nods once, in approval, in pride, maybe in acknowledgement that this was only the beginning. Because in the crisis of the 3rd century, surviving one Gothic assault isn't the end of anything. It's the warm-up. You stand in the cold morning mist, listening to the creak of armor and the low hum of fear. Aurelian walks the line, steady and stern, grounding the shaking world around him. Dawn is barely a suggestion on the horizon, a faint smear of grey, light slow crawling across the sky, as if even the sun is reluctant to witness what's coming next. The air is thick and strange, carrying the metallic scent that always appears before battle. It's hard to pinpoint. Is it blood, steel, nerves? Probably all three, but you know it well now. It clings to your tongue and slides into your lungs with every breath. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, trying to keep your toes warm inside your sandals. Your armor hangs heavy on your shoulders, cold enough to make your skin flinch wherever the metal touches. Every movement causes a muted chorus of clinks, rattles, and groans from the soldiers around you. Nobody speaks, nobody jokes, nobody pretends everything is fine. This is the hour when even the bravest men reconsider their life choices. Somewhere in the distance, a crow caws, a sharp, ugly sound that cuts through the silence like a poorly timed joke. You and everyone else pretend it didn't sound ominous. You're not superstitious, not at all. Definitely not thinking about omens. Nope. Aurelian, as always, is the only one moving with purpose. He walks down the front line with the posture of a man who has already calculated every possible outcome and has personally decided that losing is not one of them. His cloak shifts behind him in the faint wind, his expression unreadable in the half-light. His eyes sweep over each soldier, not lingering long, but long enough for you to feel seen, evaluated, judged, prepared. He reaches a veteran 2 men down from you, a man with scars tracing half his face like a topographical map of previous trauma. Aurelian grips his shoulder firmly, nods once, and the veteran straightens with newfound fire. Aurelian doesn't need speeches. He is the speech. You swallow hard and wiggle your fingers around your spear. Your hands are cold, stiff, and trembling just enough to betray you. You try to hide it by gripping tighter, but all that does is make your knuckles ache. Aurelian gets closer. Your heartbeat increases, not out of fear of him, or not just fear of him, but because the battle is close now. Close enough that every instinct in your body is screaming contradictory instructions. Run! No, stay! No, hide! No, stand tall! Pretend to faint! No, wait, don't! You force your breath into steady rhythm, but it keeps catching in your throat. You feel someone step slightly closer beside you. It's a younger soldier, barely old enough to shave, breathing fast, eyes darting across the horizon, like he expects the enemy to jump scare him. You nudge your shoulder against his and whisper, "Breathe." He nods, though you can see he's one inhale away from hyperventilating. Aurelian reaches your section of the line. Even without looking directly at you, his presence feels like stepping into a stronger gravitational field. The air thickens. The men around you straighten. Fear doesn't vanish, but it reorganizes itself into something more useful. Aurelian stops in front of your centurion. They exchange a low-voiced conversation, the kind you're not meant to hear, but you pick up fragments. Hold the flank. Fast charge. No hesitation. Break their momentum. Your centurion nods, jaw tense so tightly you can hear his teeth grinding. Then Aurelian moves on. He doesn't say a word to you specifically, but when he passes, he glances at your shield, the scratches, the dent near the rim from yesterday's brush with the Goths, and gives a barely perceptible nod. It's nothing. It's everything. You stand a little firmer. A wind rises, cold and sharp, ruffling cloaks and carrying with it the distant clamor of the enemy camp. Drums, shouts, the unmistakable clank of men preparing to kill men. Aurelian climbs onto a small rise overlooking the line, still silent, still composed. The sky behind him has shifted from grey to a pale, hesitant blue, illuminating the soldiers in full. Rows upon rows of faces etched with tension, determination, dread, and reluctant courage. This would be the moment for a grand speech, something poetic, something memorable, something historians will quote dramatically later. But Aurelian is not that kind of emperor. He lifts his chin, surveys the field, and says in a deep, level voice, "Stand, today. Rome stands with you." And that's it. 8 words. 8 words that hit harder than any theatrical oration. A ripple moves through the ranks. Backs straighten. Chests rise. You feel heat in your chest, burning away some of the cold. The trembling in your hand stops. Or maybe you just don't notice it anymore. Your centurion raises his spear. Officers shout orders. The lines tighten. The enemy drums grow louder. A deep, steady boom that syncs with your heartbeat. The air changes again. The metallic scent intensifies. The world narrows into the space between now and the moment steel hits steel. You look left, then right, seeing only helmets and shields and faces that mirror your own terror and resolve. Another gust of wind rushes past, carrying dust and the rumble of approaching footsteps. The enemy beginning their march toward you. This is the final moment of stillness. You breathe in, cold, metallic, sharp, a smell you will never forget. And with Aurelian's figure standing like a statue carved from iron at the head of the line, you find that somewhere beneath the fear is something that feels dangerously close to courage. The clash erupts, shields shatter, arrows whistle, and the noise is so overwhelming you temporarily forget your own name. Aurelian slices through the chaos like a man late to an appointment. Everything happens at once. One moment you're staring into the pale morning light, breath held, heart pounding, waiting for the first impact. The next moment, the world turns into a blender set on catastrophic. The enemy slams into your line with so much force you stumble backward, shield smashing into your chin. You taste iron, blood, metal, fear, breakfast olives. It's hard to tell. The sound is unbearable, not loud, violent, a thick physical sound that punches through your helmet and directly into your skull. Arrows howl overhead in chaotic arcs, some hitting shields with heavy thunks, others embedding themselves into the ground beside your feet with unsettling finality. Spears jab and clash. Swords ring out like furious bells. Somewhere nearby, someone screams a battle cry so intense it cracks halfway through. You raise your shield just in time to block a blow from an enemy warrior who looks like he eats nothing but raw boulders. The impact vibrates down your arm and into your ribs. Your grip tightens on your spear, and you thrust forward, hitting something. You don't have time to check what. Your training kicks in, even though every instinct in your body is screaming at you to run away and find a nice quiet field to cry in. You plant your feet. You brace, you shove, but the enemy is everywhere, pushing, clawing, swinging axes that look too heavy to be legal. Around you, men grunt, curse, and crash into one another. The line bends under pressure. Mud churns beneath your sandals. The air grows thick with sweat, steam, and the sharp, metallic stink of freshly exposed iron. You steal a glance down the line. A mistake. Someone gets knocked off their feet. Another collapses with a spear lodged in his shield. A third is backing up too quickly, slipping in the mud, tumbling onto his back. This is not good. This is very not good. Then Aurelian arrives. He appears out of the chaos like someone pressed the summon boss character button. One second he's nowhere to be seen. The next he's charging through the fray with the energy of a man who has been impatiently waiting for violence all morning. His cloak is ripped. His armor is dented. His expression screams, "I cannot believe I have to fix this myself." But to you, and every terrified soldier within 10 feet, he might as well be a celestial being descending from the heavens. He doesn't shout pointless bravado. He doesn't waste time. He doesn't pause to gather everyone around for a pep talk. Instead, he moves with surgical brutality, striking down enemies with terrifying precision. You watch him deflect a sword with the edge of his shield, step forward, and end the fight with a single clean strike. You watch him shoulder check a man twice his size so violently the poor fool lifts off the ground. You watch him stab, parry, pivot, slam, and bash his way through a cluster of warriors who, until 5 seconds ago, looked frighteningly unstoppable. Aurelian doesn't fight like a general. He fights like someone who refuses to see his empire crumble on his watch. His presence creates a ripple effect. Soldiers who were faltering suddenly find their footing. Men who were on the verge of breaking push forward again. Even you feel a strange surge of energy, courage, adrenaline, or simply the desire to avoid embarrassing yourself in front of the emperor. Your centurion roars, "With him! With him!" And you do. You surge forward with the others, closing ranks around Aurelian. The enemy line wavers. Not much, but enough. Aurelian notices instantly. He signals with his sword, and the Roman line responds as if mentally tethered to him. You advance in a tight formation, steps pounding in unison, shields locked, spears thrusting forward in disciplined rhythm. Your world narrows to the space in front of your shield. Push, stab, brace, repeat. An enemy warrior lunges at you with a wooden club, shouting something that sounds like a threat but might just be his grocery list. You block the blow with your shield, and the force rattles your bones. Before he can strike again, your neighbor drives his spear into the man's shoulder, sending him reeling back. You've never been so grateful for the existence of other people. But the battle isn't over, not even close. The enemy renews its assault, throwing everything they have into a frenzied push. The lines collide again, and once again you're thrust into a blur of noise, pain, heat, and terror. You duck a swinging blade, lose your balance, stumble, and barely manage to stay upright. A soldier behind you grabs your cloak and shoves you back into the formation. You want to thank him, but you're too busy trying not to die. Somewhere ahead, Aurelian grapples with a massive Gothic champion, a man whose beard alone weighs more than your backpack. The warrior swings a huge axe, sending sparks flying off Aurelian's shield. For a moment it looks like the giant might overpower him, but Aurelian twists suddenly, steps inside the man's swing, and strikes with such controlled fury that the champion drops like a puppet whose strings have been cut. The legion erupts in renewed shouts. Aurelian raises his sword. You feel the momentum shift. The push becomes a charge. The charge becomes a rout. The enemy folds, slowly at first, then all at once, like a badly built market stall collapsing in the wind. They rush backward, stumbling over their own wounded, tripping through mud, dropping shields, retreating toward the river. The battlefield changes around you. The noise lessens. The pressure eases. Your breathing becomes less like frantic gasping and more like exhausted wheezing. When the final pockets of resistance break and scatter, you sag forward, leaning heavily on your spear. Sweat stings your eyes. Your ribs ache, your ears ring, your legs feel like unbaked bread. Aurelian stands at the center of the field, breathing hard but still composed. Mud streaks his armor. His hair is plastered to his forehead, but his eyes burn with fierce, victorious focus. He didn't just lead the battle, he saved it. He saved you. Your centurion limps over and claps your shoulder. You still alive? You nod. Then, congratulate yourself, he says. Aurelian won today, which means somehow so did we. You look out over the battered field, knowing one thing with absolute clarity. If Aurelian hadn't been here, this would have been your last sunrise. He didn't just save the empire today, he saved everyone's butt, including yours. Victory achieved. You now spend hours picking up the aftermath. Broken spears, dented helmets, and what can only be described as mysterious chunks. Every soldier has questions. Nobody has answers. The battlefield the morning after a victory is one of the least glamorous places in the ancient world. You always imagine triumph as shining armor, laurel wreaths, cheering crowds, triumphant music, something heroic and inspiring. What you get instead is a damp field full of mud, debris, and smells that should honestly be illegal. The first thing you notice is that everything hurts. Your shoulders ache. Your feet feel like they've aged 50 years. Your shield arm trembles whenever you lift anything heavier than a spoon. Even your eyelashes hurt for some reason. You're not entirely sure how eyelashes can experience pain, but you're living proof. But Aurelian doesn't believe in downtime. Not for himself, and especially not for the rest of you. At dawn, he orders cleanup because apparently defeating the Goths was only part one of today's misery. Part two is waste management. You grab a basket and trudge into the battlefield with the others. It's a surreal landscape. The ground is churned into uneven trenches of mud. Shields lie half-buried like forgotten turtle shells. Somebody's sandal is stuck in a tree branch. You don't even want to know how that happened. A spear is wedged upright in the dirt at a weird angle, swaying slightly like it's still confused by the events of yesterday. And then there are the chunks. No one talks about the chunks. A soldier beside you lifts something unidentifiable with the tip of his spear, frowns, and then very carefully sets it back down. I don't get paid enough for this, he mutters. You fully agree. The work is slow and monotonous. You pick up shattered arrow shafts, snap them for disposal, drop them into the baskets. You retrieve discarded helmets dented so badly they now resemble abstract sculptures. You drag shields back to camp in stacks so tall they should be considered structural hazards, and you try very, very hard not to step on anything living, formally living, or ambiguously living. The veterans move through the mess with grim efficiency. This is not their first battlefield cleanup. They know where to look for salvageable gear, where to avoid stepping, and how to detach a broken spearhead from a tree trunk without giving themselves a concussion. The recruits, they're a different story. One stands frozen, staring at a sword snapped clean in half. "I didn't know metal could do that," he whispers. Another nudges a helmet and immediately jumps back when a beetle crawls out. A third sits on a log and stares into the distance with the expression of someone reconsidering all their career choices. You can't blame them. A battlefield after the storm has passed is haunting. It looks less like a place where brave men fought and more like a place where a chaotic toddler god threw a tantrum. Occasionally, Aurelian strides through the mess, inspecting everything with his usual intensity. He doesn't comment on bodies. Those have been respectfully sorted for funeral rites, but he does comment on gear. Why was this shield left here? This armor is still usable. We don't waste spearheads, ever. He stops at one point and lifts a helmet with a massive dent in the top. It looks like someone tried to flatten it with a boulder. Aurelian turns it over in his hands, then shakes his head. "Not repairable," he announces. 3 soldiers immediately drop their baskets to admire the helmet like it's some kind of museum artifact. One whistles, one pokes the dent. One asks, "How is the man who wore it?" Aurelian gives him a long look. "He's fine. The helmet isn't." You silently add that to your list of things I did not expect to hear today. Hours pass. The sun climbs higher, warming the mud just enough to make everything squishier. Your sandals suction to the ground with loud, embarrassing sounds. You pull them free again and again, cursing under your breath. Sweat drips into your eyes. Your back screams. Your arms ache. At one point, a fellow soldier staggers toward you, carrying a shield with a mysterious, unidentifiable stain. "Do you think this comes out?" he asks. "Not even the gods could get that out," you reply. By midday, the cleanup has turned into a strange, exhausted camaraderie. You crack small jokes, you complain about your knees, you find comfort in knowing everyone else is equally miserable. It's oddly bonding. Nothing strengthens friendships like jointly suffering menial labor after a major traumatic event. Someone tries to brighten the mood by showing off the weirdest item they've found, a wooden flute carved with strange designs. "Gothic instrument," he says proudly. Another soldier squints. "That's a spoon." No, I'm pretty sure. "Friend, it is absolutely a spoon." Late in the day, you find what may be the saddest sight of all, a perfectly good cloak lying across a bush, soaked in mud but otherwise intact. You hold it up triumphantly. A soldier next to you gasps. "Treasure!" he exclaims. "It's the nicest thing anyone has found all day." As the sun finally dips toward the horizon, the battlefield begins to resemble a normal patch of land again, albeit one still recovering from a terrible thunderstorm made of angry humans. The debris is cleared, salvage is gathered, tools are sorted. Aurelian walks the grounds one final time, nodding approvingly. "It's enough," he says, and the entire legion collectively collapses in relief. You trudge back into camp, filthy, exhausted, and smelling like a stew made of sweat, rust, and trauma. But the work is done. The field is clean. The Goths are gone. Rome, for today, survived. As you sit by the fire later, scraping mud off your sandals, you realize something important. Aurelian can win battles, but you have to clean them up. And honestly, that might be the hardest part of war. Aurelian rules like your strictest gym teacher. No slacking, no excuses, and everyone stretches before battle. You respect him, you fear him, you cannot tell the difference anymore. From the moment you joined his legion, you realized Aurelian operates on a system of discipline so intense, it might actually be visible from space. He doesn't shout because he doesn't need to. His expectations are so clear, so ironclad, so aggressively structured that the entire army behaves like a well-tuned musical instrument, a very sweaty, heavily armored musical instrument. Your day begins with what Aurelian calls morning readiness. Everyone else calls it horrible. At sunrise, though sometimes he starts before sunrise, because why should nature dictate the schedule? Aurelian storms through camp, inspecting everything from tent ropes to shield straps. If your sandals are tied poorly, he notices. If you're still adjusting your tunic, he notices. If you breathe wrong, he probably notices. Your centurion once said that Aurelian could spot a crooked spear from 2 miles away. Nobody questioned it. The first time you witness his morning inspection, you're half asleep, clutching your gear, when Aurelian stops in front of you. His gaze moves from your helmet to your boots to the uneven way you're holding your shield. He doesn't say a word. He just raises one eyebrow. You immediately adjust everything on your body, even your posture, without fully knowing why. He moves on, leaving you questioning your entire existence. After inspection comes training. Aurelian's training sessions are legendary, whispered about in the same fearful tone people use when discussing natural disasters. They involve running, drilling, marching, shield work, formation work, and a suspicious amount of yelling, mostly directed at the soldiers, though occasionally at the sun if it dares to rise too slowly. Aurelian doesn't tolerate shortcuts. If someone tries to conserve energy by half lifting their shield, he calls them out. If someone relaxes during a drill, he immediately increases the difficulty. One poor soldier once sneezed during formation practice. Aurelian made the entire unit repeat the drill from the beginning to build mental resilience. Every soldier knows the rules. If Aurelian says march, you march. If Aurelian says run, you run. If Aurelian says again, you do it again even if you're crying internally. If Aurelian looks disappointed, you pray for forgiveness. But here's the strange part. It works. Under his relentless schedule, chaos melts into order. Weakness hardens into strength. Panic turns into discipline. The army becomes a single organism, efficient, focused, unstoppable. Even the veterans who once scoffed at emperor training sessions have stopped complaining. They realize what you do. Aurelian's schedule is the only thing holding the empire together. He sets the tone. He defines the pace. He shapes the day like a blacksmith shapes a blade. And he does it all without seeming to tire. At midday, when you're exhausted and certain you'll pass out, Aurelian is still walking around inspecting fortifications, checking supplies, and issuing orders. You catch him talking to a group of engineers about the angle of a trench wall, then redirecting cavalry officers about scouting patterns, then personally adjusting a recruit's posture during shield drills. It's like watching someone live 3 days at once. At one point, you overhear 2 soldiers whispering. Do you think he sleeps? No. Does he eat? Probably just absorbs nutrients through rage. Mealtimes under Aurelian follow strict schedules as well. No dawdling, no wandering, no wasting food, no waiting around for someone to finish scraping the bottom of the pot. You sit, eat, stand, and go back to work in a perfectly timed cycle. In the evenings, instead of rest, Aurelian introduces reflection and improvement time, which is a fancy term for pointing out everything you did wrong today. It's not malicious, it's not cruel, it's precise. He'll walk through the assembled ranks and call out details in a calm, steady tone. Your spear arm dropped during the charge. Your footwork was sloppy. Your shield was too high. Your formation spacing was inconsistent. Then for balance, fix it tomorrow. He doesn't insult anyone. He doesn't crush confidence. He simply identifies flaws like a craftsman examining tools. And strangely enough, his blunt honesty doesn't feel embarrassing. It feels motivating. You want to improve. You want to match his standards. You want to make him proud, even though he never says he's proud. He doesn't give praise often, but when he does, it's legendary. One afternoon, after a grueling march, the line held perfectly against a mock assault. Aurelian surveyed the formation, nodded once, and muttered, "Acceptable." The men cheered like he'd declared a national holiday. Your favorite moment comes late one night, when you're half asleep and trying to retie a strap on your armor. Aurelian suddenly appears beside you, checking the alignment of a nearby tent. His presence startles you so much you drop your strap and salute out of sheer panic. Aurelian looks at you, then at the strap, then back at you. "Faster," he says. You nod so hard you almost sprain your neck. But beneath the tough love, beneath the punishing schedule, beneath the terrifyingly high standards, you realize something else. Aurelian cares. He cares about the army. He cares about Rome. He cares enough to demand excellence, not because he enjoys watching you suffer, although that is debatable, but because he genuinely believes that disciplined soldiers can save the empire. And somehow, against all odds, you find yourself agreeing. At night, lying in your tent, muscles aching and hands blistered, you realize the truth. You don't respect Aurelian despite the tough love. You respect him because of it. And tomorrow morning, before the sun even considers rising, he'll be there again, ready to march, ready to train, ready to fix the empire by sheer force of routine. You respect him, you fear him, you still can't tell the difference, but you will follow him anywhere. Word comes from the east. Queen Zenobia has declared her own empire, dazzlingly wealthy and frustratingly confident. Aurelian mutters something in Latin that probably translates to absolutely not. The news spreads through camp like spilled wine. Fast, messy, and causing immediate arguments. You hear it first from a passing scout who unloads the information casually, as if announcing the weather. Yeah, Zenobia controls Egypt, Syria, Judea, all the trade routes, half the wealth of the East. You know, the usual. He shrugs and wanders off, leaving you stunned. Zenobia, the Queen of Palmyra, scholar of Greek, fluent in Egyptian, allegedly descended from Cleopatra, daughter of a noble house, conqueror of her neighbors, diplomat, strategist, and, according to rumor, capable of riding 100 miles without breaking a sweat. You're not sure if that last one is true, but given what you've heard about her, you wouldn't be surprised if she also juggles flaming spears and writes poetry on the side. Her rise is undeniable and problematic. Palmyra, once Rome's loyal trading partner, has gone fully independent. Not gently independent either. Boldly independent, gloriously independent, empire-stealingly independent. Zenobia has taken over entire provinces like she's collecting decorative pottery. The moment Aurelian hears the full report, something inside him snaps into place with the quiet precision of a war machine booting up. He nods once, mutters something that sounds suspiciously like non-eater, and immediately begins preparing the army. No speeches, no hesitation, no dramatic flair, just immediate scheduling. Pack up, we march east, your centurion announces. You barely finished recovering from the Gothic campaign. Your legs still hurt. Your armor still smells like trauma and onions, and yet here you are, tightening straps and adjusting buckles while Aurelian paces around the command area, plotting the reconquest of an entire breakaway empire, like he's planning a shopping list. The march begins before dawn. The long road to Palmyra stretches before you, hundreds of miles across forests, plains, rivers, mountains, deserts, and general existential despair. You quickly learn that marching east is a whole new flavor of unpleasant. First comes the Danubian terrain, muddy, uneven, full of bugs that believe the Roman army exists solely as a buffet. You swat at them constantly, which only results in Aurelian shouting that you should keep your hands on your gear at all times. Next come the plains, which seem endless. You walk for hours, days, weeks, convinced you've passed the same lonely tree at least 7 times. Every day feels exactly like the day before. Walk, eat, walk, sleep, walk, cry internally. Walk again. Then come the mountains. Oh, the mountains. The passes are narrow, rocky, and so steep your calves threaten to unionize. You climb switchback paths that disappear into the clouds. You descend slopes so steep you have to lean backwards to avoid tumbling into oblivion. You trudge through cold winds sharp enough to bite your skin. More than once you find yourself wondering if perhaps Zenobia has a point. Independence suddenly seems pretty reasonable. Through all of it, Aurelian remains maddeningly consistent, marching in front, pointing at things, correcting formations, shouting encouragement that feels suspiciously like threats. The man is tireless, unstoppable, relentless. His determination is contagious in a way that is both inspiring and slightly terrifying. During a short break, you overhear 2 veterans talking. "Do you think Zenobia knows we're coming?" one asks. "Oh, she knows," the other says. "She's probably expecting us." "And does that bother Aurelian?" The veteran snorts. "He'll take it as a personal challenge." Eventually, the mountains fade into rolling hills, then into land that feels warmer, drier, more golden. The sun grows harsher. Your cloak grows heavier. Your water skin empties faster each day. You begin to develop a special kind of hatred for dust. Not sand, not dirt. Specifically dust. Fine, clingy, everywhere dust. The jokes you used to make with the other soldiers fade. Conversations shorten. The march becomes a meditation in exhaustion. Feet forward, feet forward, feet forward. At one point, you swear your feet are moving independently of your will. Aurelian increases the pace. You consider becoming a deserter. But the idea of Aurelian catching you is more terrifying than any punishment Rome could invent. The geography shifts again, slowly, subtly. Hills flatten into scrubland. Scrubland slips into desert. The air dries until your lips crack. The heat presses against your armor like a second skin. Every breath tastes like you're inhaling the inside of a clay oven. This is the edge of Palmyra's world, the frontier between Rome and Zenobia's realm. And it is here that the first signs of her empire appear. Small villages with intricate stone reliefs. Traders on camelback wearing flowing robes. Markets full of spices so fragrant you smell them from half a mile away. You cross paths with caravans carrying silks, incense, jewels, all symbols of wealth that departed Roman control and went east. Even exhausted, you can't help being impressed. Palmyra is rich, very rich, the kind of rich that makes Roman governors twitch with envy. The locals talk about Zenobia with reverence. She is wise, she is strong, she protects us, she rides with her troops, she speaks many languages, she negotiates with kings, she terrifies her enemies. You exchange looks with your fellow soldiers. Great, your emperor is marching to fight a woman who sounds like she could conquer half the world before breakfast. The march becomes heavier with each step, the air humming with the weight of what's coming. The desert stretches ahead, shimmering heat, wide skies, and silence so vast it feels like a living thing. Aurelian surveys the horizon, hands clasped behind his back, eyes narrowed. "This ends," he says. 3 simple words. 3 terrifying words. 3 words that propel the legion forward again. And as you trudge behind him, feeling the desert sun melt your bones, you realize you are marching into a confrontation that will shape the fate of nations. Rome versus Palmyra. Aurelian versus Zenobia. Iron discipline versus unstoppable ambition. And you'll be right there in the middle. Because Aurelian decided he's bringing the empire back. And apparently, that means you're bringing it back too. You march under a sun that feels personally offended by your existence. Sand gets everywhere. Your sandals, your hair, your soul. How anyone lives here voluntarily remains a mystery. You've marched through forests thick enough to swallow noise, across muddy plains that try to steal your sandals, through mountain passes that made you reconsider your entire relationship with gravity. But nothing could have prepared you for the desert. The desert is not terrain. The desert is an enemy. It attacks you from all angles. The heat scorches from above, the sand flays from below, and the wind, somehow hotter than the sun itself, blasts directly into your face like you personally insulted it. You quickly realize why ancient poets wrote dramatic verses about deserts. They weren't being poetic, they were traumatized. The sun rises like it's clocking in for a long shift of harassment. By mid-morning, the sky turns into a shimmering white haze, and the heat wraps around you like an angry, invisible blanket. Your helmet becomes an oven. Your armor becomes an oven rack. Your cloak transforms into a cloth sauna. Even your thoughts start sweating. The sand is everywhere, everywhere. It slips into your sandals, forming little pockets of misery that grind into your skin with every step. It sneaks under your armor plates and settles in the exact spots where it can cause the most irritation. It invades your hair like a tiny, malicious army. It somehow gets behind your eyeballs. You cough and you taste sand. You drink water and you taste sand. You open your mouth to breathe, and yep, sand again. Your fellow soldiers suffer just as deeply. One trudges forward muttering, "I'm 80% sand at this point." Another lifts his sandal to dump out the dunes forming inside it. A third stops walking entirely and just stares up at the sun like he's negotiating for mercy. He does not receive mercy. The heat makes everything slower. Every movement takes effort. Even lifting your feet feels like hauling 2 sandbags strapped to your ankles. Sweat evaporates instantly, leaving you coated in a layer of salt and dust that makes you look like you've been aged 10 years in one morning. The worst part is the water, or rather, the lack of it. The army's water ration is strict, brutally strict. Each soldier receives a small portion, carefully measured by officers who take their job very seriously. You watch men cradle their water skins like newborn children. Opening one is a sacred ritual. Drinking from it is a moment of existential crisis. You take a sip, one pitiful, hesitant sip, and feel nothing. Your throat is still dry. Your tongue is still dusty. Your soul still feels like it's roasting over a campfire. You consider taking another sip, but then you remember that the next well is days away, and you reluctantly tie the skin shut again. The desert swallows sound, making every footstep crunch unnervingly loud. Conversation dwindles. Jokes die instantly. Complaining takes too much energy. You march in silence, surrounded by an endless ocean of dunes that look identical no matter how long you stare at them. The desert plays tricks on your mind. You start seeing things that aren't there, shimmering pools of water, shaded oases, maybe even a tavern with cold wine and a bored-looking server wiping the counter. A veteran smacks you lightly on the helmet. "Don't trust anything that looks like relief," he says. "That's the desert bargaining for your soul." You nod, unsure whether he's joking. Aurelian, of course, is thriving. He marches ahead of everyone else, unwavering, unstoppable. The same speed as always. He doesn't seem affected by the heat. He doesn't seem bothered by the sand. At one point, you swear you see him walking faster when the wind picks up, as though he's challenging the desert itself to a foot race. Your centurion tries to imitate his pace. You and the rest of the legion try to imitate the centurion. The result is a long chain of men suffering in increasing degrees of silence, wheezing, panting, and debating internally whether it's socially acceptable to die dramatically at midday. By afternoon, the ground feels too hot to stand on. You can feel the heat radiating through your sandals. A soldier in front of you hops from foot to foot and whispers, "I think the earth is cooking me." Someone behind him mutters, "At least you'll be seasoned with sand." Occasionally the wind shifts and brings with it a new kind of horror. Sandstorms. The sky darkens strangely. The air grows heavy. The officers shout warnings. You barely have time to wrap your cloak over your face before the desert launches itself upward and outward, in a blinding, suffocating frenzy. Sand whips against your cheeks like tiny knives. You hold your shield sideways to block some of the impact, squinting through the storm. Breathing becomes nearly impossible. The world disappears into swirling beige chaos. You stumble forward, guided only by the blurry shapes of the soldiers around you. When the sandstorm passes, you look like something dug out of a pottery kiln. Aurelian appears untouched. Naturally, you resume marching. Eventually, late in the day, you see shapes on the horizon, tiny dark bumps that slowly resolve into the outline of palm trees. The most beautiful sight you've ever seen. Men start whispering, pointing, picking up speed. An oasis, not a mirage, not a hallucination, not a desert prank. Actual water. When you finally reach it, you collapse beside the pool, cupping water in your hands. You don't even care that it tastes faintly of mud, warm frogs, and the sweat of every soldier who touched it before you. It's perfect. The entire legion relaxes for the first time all day. Some lie down, some drink until they hiccup, some wash the sand from their hair, some stare at the water like it's a message from the gods. Aurelian stands watch. He doesn't sit, he doesn't drink first, he doesn't remove his armor, he just scans the horizon, already preparing for tomorrow's march. Because for him, the desert is just another obstacle. For you, it's a slow, sandy, soul-exfoliating nightmare. But as you sit there, finally cool, finally shaded, finally hydrated, a strange thought crosses your mind. If you can survive this desert, you can survive anything, even whatever Aurelian plans next. At dusk, the desert gives way to towers, colonnades, and shimmering palaces. Palmyra rises out of the dust like a mirage with better architecture. You've been staring at dunes for so long that your brain has started using sand as its default texture. The idea of buildings, actual buildings, feels like a myth. So when you first spot those distant shapes breaking the horizon, you assume your eyes are staging a coup. But as the sun lowers, the shapes sharpen. What you thought were more dunes become columns. What you thought was a heat haze becomes the faint gold of carved stone. What you thought was yet another mirage becomes Palmyra. The entire legion slows, mesmerized, because Palmyra isn't just a city, it's a statement. The desert parts like curtains. And suddenly there it is, a glowing jewel set between worlds. The fading sunlight catches the marble and sandstone in hues of amber, honey, and rose. Long pillars stretch upward like fingers reaching into the cooling sky. Archways frame the horizon like paintings. Giant temples gleam with inlays of gold that flicker in the last rays of dusk. You've seen Rome, sure. You've seen forts and frontier towns, but nothing prepares you for this. Palmyra looks like someone took a dream, dipped it in gold, and then hired the finest architects in the East. Your fellow soldiers stop walking. One whispers, "By the gods!" Another says, "If this is a mirage, it's the nicest one yet." A third mutters, "Do you think the city will let us in if we promise to behave?" You can't blame them. After weeks of marching through heat, dust, dehydration, despair, and sand, so much sand, the sudden arrival of this glittering city hits like emotional whiplash. You feel almost unworthy to look at it directly, like staring at a god too long. Aurelian stands at the front of the line, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. He is not dazzled, he is evaluating. The man could witness the sun rising on a crystal palace floating on clouds and still think, could be better fortified. Palmyra does not look like a rebel state. It looks like a civilization in full bloom. Caravans come and go through its gates. Silks unfurl in the breeze. Merchants shout in languages you don't recognize. Streets lined with cypress trees stretch toward enormous temples decked in carvings of lions, stars, and gods whose names you've only heard whispered. The city is alive, vibrant, humming, wealthy. A city like this doesn't just break away from Rome. A city like this chooses independence. And suddenly, Zenobia's confidence makes perfect sense. As you march closer, the architectural details emerge more sharply. The famous great colonnade of Palmyra seems to stretch forever. Stone columns perfectly spaced, perfectly carved, perfectly radiant. The sun hits them one last time before disappearing, turning every pillar into a vertical flame of gold. You've never seen anything so surreal, and yet despite the beauty, tension crawls up your spine. Because cities this rich do not roll over easily. They do not surrender out of fear. They do not kneel for free. And Zenobia is no ordinary ruler. The closer you get to Palmyra, the more you feel her presence, not physically, but through the city itself, the precision of its buildings, the confidence in its design, the pride of its people, the way even the wind seems to whisper of a queen who shaped an empire with her will. Your centurion walks up beside you, staring at the skyline. She built this, he says quietly, or at least she believed in it enough to claim it. You swallow hard. The march slows to a halt as the sun finally dips below the desert edge, leaving only twilight and the soft, flickering glow of oil lamps lining the distant streets. The city becomes a constellation on the ground. Windows glow, torches burn, silhouettes move through temple halls. Aurelian raises a hand, signaling the legion to stop. "We camp here," he announces. The soldiers groan softly, not out of rebellion, but out of sheer exhaustion. Some collapse instantly to the sand, dropping their packs and staring at the illuminated city with wonder. As camp is set up, you sit near a fire and stare at Palmyra in the dark, unable to look away. One soldier beside you says, "If Rome looked like that, I'd be loyal too." Another replies, "Careful, Aurelian will hear you." You both glance nervously toward the command tent, but even as you marvel, the war sense in your chest stirs uneasily. Because beauty doesn't mean safety, wealth doesn't mean peace. A stunning city can hide sharp teeth, and Palmyra has many teeth. Traders who pass near your camp talk about Zenobia's armies, well-trained, well-equipped, fiercely loyal. They talk about her wisdom, her charisma, her ambition. They talk about how she has outmaneuvered governors and defeated Roman generals. They talk about how she walks among her soldiers, fighting beside them. You shiver, not from fear, from anticipation. Because if this city is Zenobia's crown, then tomorrow Aurelian will reach for it. Two rulers, two visions, two empires. You, stuck in the middle, wipe some grit from your eyes, though you're not sure if it's sand or nerves. Night deepens. Stars bloom above the desert. Palmyra glimmers beneath them like a second sky. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tonight, you stare at the city that awaits you, dreamlike, shimmering, haunting, magnificent, and you realize you've never marched toward anything more beautiful or more dangerous. The siege begins. Time becomes soup. Hygiene becomes a rumor. You spend your days throwing things, fixing things, and trying not to get hit by incoming objects. Sieges, you quickly learn, are not glorious. They are not heroic. They are not noble. They are long, miserable, repetitive marathons of filth, boredom, terror, and chores. Endless chores. More chores than you thought possible in a military career. In the first few days, everyone is energized. The legion surges forward with disciplined confidence, setting up siege lines, raising fortifications, digging trenches, preparing engines. Aurelian walks the perimeter, analyzing the walls of Palmyra with the keen eye of a man mentally dismantling them brick by brick. But then, nothing happens. Well, things happen, but nothing glamorous. Your day begins with the sound of a horn, the smell of soldiers who have not bathed in questionable amounts of time, and the appearance of a small breakfast that tastes like sawdust mixed with regret. You drink water from a skin that smells faintly like goat. Then it's time for your morning task. You dig trenches, you carry stones, you drag beams, you adjust palisades, you curse silently into the desert wind. Palmyra watches from its gleaming walls, its defenders lounging like cats on high ledges, occasionally shooting arrows at you when they get bored. You discover quickly that the defenders of Palmyra are annoyingly good at archery. They also seem to enjoy shouting insults in several languages, many of which you don't understand but assume are unflattering. From your perspective, the siege becomes a cycle that looks like this. Wake up, work, duck incoming arrows, work, get yelled at by a centurion, work, throw a rock at a wall, watch the rock bounce off uselessly, work, try to nap, fail, work. Consider joining the enemy if it means access to a functioning bath. Because hygiene is absolutely gone, erased, deleted from history. The desert dust clings to you like an unpleasant second skin. Sweat dries on top of sweat. You wipe your face, and more dust replaces it instantly. Your hair feels like a clay pot. Your tunic has developed new experimental textures. You smell like a mixture of metal, onions, fear, and sand, an aroma so potent it could be bottled and used as a weapon. At one point, a soldier near you attempts a desert bath, which means rubbing sand on himself in a circle and calling it exfoliation. Aurelian walks by, takes one look at the spectacle, and simply says, "No." You try not to think about water, precious, scarce, rationed. You drink only enough to stay functional. Washing is a young man's dream. The only time water touches your face is when a stray splash from a bucket hits you while someone else is cleaning their bowl. Speaking of bowls, the food situation is challenging. Daily rations during a siege are best described as calories, technically. You receive a bowl of something grayish, something lumpy, something that crunches but shouldn't. Some days it tastes like grain, other days it tastes like sand. One day it tasted like existential dread. You don't ask questions, nobody asks questions. Questions lead to answers, and answers lead to sadness. Meanwhile, Palmyra taunts you with visible wealth. From the siege lines, you can glimpse balconies draped with fabric, fountains glittering in courtyards, and the faint shimmer of gardens with water, actual water, flowing water. The sight of it drives the soldiers insane. Imagine taking a bath, someone murmurs one night. Another swoons, literally swoons. There are attempts, poorly thought out attempts, to sneak closer to the walls for a better look at the city's luxuries. All of them fail. Most end with arrows landing uncomfortably close to the offenders. But the work continues. Aurelian pushes his engineers to build siege engines faster than human bodies are meant to operate. Ballistae, onagers, towers, ramps. You don't know what half of these things do, but you are regularly assigned to push, pull, or lift them. And they're all heavy. Everything is heavy. You have become a professional lifter of things you don't understand. When the engines fire, the ground shakes. Stones slam into the walls of Palmyra with thunderous cracks. Dust erupts in towering clouds. You cheer. You feel hope. You think, this is it. But no. The walls remain standing, mocking you. One day, a massive stone is launched from a Palmyrene catapult in return. It lands terrifyingly close to your unit, spraying sand in your face. A soldier beside you shouts, "I quit," and immediately gets ordered to retrieve the stone so it can be reused. The worst days are the hot ones, the ones where the sun feels like an entity bent on murdering you personally. You work in sluggish motion, sweat stings your eyes, even the wind is warm, like someone exhaling on you aggressively. The best days are the windy ones, not because the wind cools you, it doesn't, but because it helps carry the smell of the camp in some direction that isn't directly back into your nose. Through it all, Aurelian is tireless, unflinching, determined. He inspects the lines every day. He tests the tension on ballista ropes. He corrects the engineers. He encourages the troops, though his version of encouragement sounds suspiciously like threats. He shouts things like, "We will break this city. Work faster. Rome does not lose. If that ramp collapses again, I'm stomping on it myself." And strangely, it works. Despite the filth, the boredom, the injuries, the heat, the sand in every orifice known to man, and a few that shouldn't exist, morale holds. Because Aurelian holds, he gives the soldiers focus, structure, purpose, even if his schedule is the only thing keeping them from collapsing like soggy bread. Days blur into weeks, weeks blur into more weeks. Time becomes a shapeless, sandy mush. Your patience thinly stretches across every day like a fraying rope. Your hygiene collapses entirely. You forget what clean feels like. Showers become a myth. Soap becomes legend. Water becomes religion. But then, one morning, as the sun rises, you hear something new, a crack, a crumble, a roar. The walls are weakening. For the first time in ages, hope flickers, and you realize the truth. The siege hasn't broken you, it's forged you, filthy, exhausted, slightly deranged, but ready, because soon you won't just be staring at Palmyra's walls. You'll be going through them. You finally see her, poised, intelligent, regal. Zenobia stares at the Roman lines like she's deciding whether any of you are worth her time. It is humbling. You expected her to be impressive, of course. Everyone talks about Zenobia, some with admiration, some with fear, some with the kind of hushed reverence usually reserved for natural disasters or tax collectors. But stories don't prepare you for the real thing. She appears on the walls of Palmyra just after sunrise, when the sky is streaked with gold and the desert wind is still cool. She stands tall, framed by stone columns carved with gods and lions, her cloak rippling behind her. She doesn't posture, she doesn't gesture, she doesn't need to. Zenobia simply is. Her presence radiates the kind of effortless authority that makes even Aurelian pause. And Aurelian pauses for no one. She looks down at the Roman camp with a calm, analytical gaze, her expression impossible to read. Her eyes glide over the siege towers, the ballistae, the ranks of soldiers, the tents, the trenches, and then land directly on you. You freeze. It feels like she just weighed your entire personality and found it deeply mediocre. The soldiers around you also go rigid. Someone whispers, "Don't blink," and you immediately blink out of panic. You're fairly certain she saw that. You're also fairly certain she's judging you for it. Zenobia's outfit alone has more confidence than your entire cohort. She wears armor, not heavy, clunky Roman armor, but elegant bronze and gold breastplates, shaped to fit her perfectly. Her cloak is deep purple, dyed with pigments so expensive the Romans would have taxed them into extinction. Her hair is braided with beads and gold thread. Her crown gleams in the sunlight. She looks less like a queen and more like someone who decided to become a myth and succeeded. Your centurion mutters under his breath, "By the gods! She really is that impressive." He says it like a confession. For a moment, the siege halts, the desert hushes, even the wind holds its breath. Zenobia lifts her chin slightly, the smallest motion but somehow commanding enough to silence an entire army. She surveys her city, then the Roman lines, then the horizon beyond. A queen assessing her domain. You've seen Roman emperors before, stressed, frantic, overburdened, paranoid, exhausted. Zenobia is none of those things. Zenobia radiates something else entirely. Control, certainty, conviction. You suddenly understand why her soldiers follow her, why her people adore her, why her empire thrives in the desert's harsh embrace, why so many provinces welcomed her rule with open arms, why she's been able to hold Rome at bay. She's not just a queen, she's a force. Aurelian approaches the front of the line, lifting his gaze to the battlements. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't bow. Neither does she. Two rulers, two empires, two unbreakable wills staring each other down. You can practically feel the air crackling. For a long, tense moment, they just look at each other. Aurelian, with his jaw clenched, eyes narrowed in iron determination. Zenobia, with her chin lifted, expression calm, confidence radiating like heat. This is more than a siege. It's a duel between minds. The soldiers around you shift uncomfortably, unsure whether they should be preparing for battle or writing poetry about whatever this moment is. The tension is thick enough to slice with a gladius. Someone behind you whispers, "Am I the only one terrified and impressed?" No one answers. No one dares break the moment. Zenobia finally turns and begins walking along the wall. With each step, her soldiers bow their heads slightly, hands over hearts. She speaks to them, not shouting, not gesturing wildly, but with a steady, clear voice that carries across the ramparts. You can't hear every word, but you hear enough to understand. She believes in them. She believes in her city. She believes in victory. You swallow hard. Rome has faced many enemies: raiders, rebels, emperors, usurpers, senators with sharp tongues. But never someone quite like this. Zenobia stops again, this time near a high parapet, and turns back toward the Roman camp. She raises one hand, palm out, a gesture that could mean anything. Peace, challenge, warning, farewell. You have no idea. Aurelian watches intently, his face unreadable, but you know him well enough by now to see the spark in his eyes, the flicker that appears only when he finds an opponent worthy of his attention. Then Zenobia drops her hand. The moment ends, she steps away from the edge of the wall, disappearing behind the stone arches, and you exhale, realizing you've been holding your breath since she first appeared. Immediately, the camp erupts into whispers, murmurs, frantic speculation. She looked unshakable. She didn't flinch at the siege engines. Do you think she'll surrender? No, absolutely not. Did you see her? She'll fight until the gods themselves drag her off that wall. Did you see the way Aurelian looked at her? Yes, like someone who just found the final boss. Your centurion turns to the cohort and growls, "Stop gossiping, back to work." But even as you trudge back to moving stones, fixing ropes, refilling trenches and dodging arrows, Zenobia remains in your mind, a figure both regal and formidable, a leader who commands loyalty with grace instead of fear. And in a strange, unsettling way, you admire her. You admire her confidence, her strength, her presence. You admire the way she stands alone against an empire without trembling. You admire the way she carved her place in history through intellect and ambition instead of legacy or luck. You admire her, and that scares you, because tomorrow, or the day after, or the day after that, you may have to help tear down the city she built, defeat the soldiers she trained, and capture the queen who just made your entire army feel like unwashed barbarians. Aurelian will push forward. Zenobia will resist. The clash is inevitable. But as the sun sets behind Palmyra, staining the desert red, you look at the walls where she stood, elegant, defiant, unbroken, and you know this siege won't end easily, not with Zenobia at the helm. She has nerves of iron, and you're about to test exactly how strong they are. When Palmyra falls, Aurelian stands at the gates, weary but triumphant. You watch as decades of chaos begin to knit back together, stitch by slow stitch. The end doesn't come with a dramatic final clash, or a thunderous roar of collapsing stone. It comes quietly, almost gently, like a sandstorm that finally loses its rage after weeks of siege, exhaustion, dust, smoke, hunger and arguments over whose turn it is to refill the water jars. The walls of Palmyra shudder under one last coordinated assault and then open, not in a burst of brilliance, not in a cinematic explosion, just a slow, reluctant parting, the city exhaling its defeat. At first, you don't even realize what's happening. The dust is thick, voices muffled, the sounds of the battering rams blending into the ambient noise of the desert. Then suddenly the shouting changes tone. Confusion ripples through the line. Did it crack? Did the gate move? Did that column just wiggle? Someone near you whispers, blink twice if the wall is falling, as if the structure needs encouragement. But then the dust clears just slightly, and you see it, a hairline crack snaking down the gate frame. Tiny at first, harmless, laughable, but then it grows, spider-webbing outward like the city itself is letting go. And then, with a groan so deep it seems to come from the bones of the earth, the massive wooden doors shift inward. Aurelian, who has not slept in approximately 13 years, steps forward. He doesn't cheer, he doesn't pump a fist in the air. He simply watches as the doors, symbols of resistance, pride, defiance, open for the first time since Zenobia declared independence. The moment feels surreal, impossible, historic, exhausting, all at once. The Legion surges ahead under strict orders not to loot, burn, pillage, yell, wander, stare too disrespectfully, or otherwise act like idiots. Aurelian's rules are specific. You march cautiously through the gate, spear in hand, shield at your side, sand grinding painfully between your toes. The air inside the city is cooler, shadowed by high stone walls and towering colonnades. For the first time in weeks, you feel shade on your skin, actual shade. You nearly cry. Palmyra doesn't feel like a conquered enemy. It feels like a city holding its breath. Streets once filled with merchants and laughter now lie silent. Silk banners flutter weakly in the breeze. Stone lions along the road stare down at the Legion with ageless indifference. The city is beautiful even in defeat, too beautiful, honestly, to have spent this long being angry at Rome. The civilians emerge slowly, cautiously. Women in flowing robes clutch children behind them. Old men lean on polished canes, watching the soldiers with guarded eyes. A group of merchants huddle together, whispering urgently about taxes because merchants cannot focus on anything else. Aurelian's officers stride forward to organize the transition of power. They do so with military efficiency, checking storehouses, securing the main square, issuing orders. You follow your unit through the streets, marveling at everything. The carved lintels, the mosaic floors, the frescoes still bright under centuries of sand and sun. War rarely ends in beauty, but here, somehow, it does. When you reach the central plaza, you see Aurelian again. He stands before the Temple of Bel, his silhouette framed by golden stone. His helmet is under his arm. His face is streaked with dust and sweat. His shoulders sag just slightly, a rare glimpse of the weight he carries. He isn't smiling, but he is victorious. For a man who has spent his entire reign putting out fires, holding broken pieces together, and fighting for Rome's life, this moment is monumental. He has reclaimed the wealthiest territories of the East. He has pulled back provinces thought lost forever. He has defeated Zenobia, the queen who challenged him, matched him, rivaled him. The East is Rome's again. Your centurion exhales beside you, the sound almost disbelieving. "It's over," he mutters. "By the gods, he did it." But it's not pride in Aurelian that hits you first. It's relief. Relief that the siege is over. Relief that you can stop dodging arrows. Relief that you can scrub sand out of places sand should never be. Relief that maybe, just maybe, the empire is beginning to stabilize. As more soldiers filter into the plaza, an eerie stillness settles. Dust hangs in the air like incense. The defeated city watches, waiting. Then Aurelian speaks. His voice is not loud, not theatrical, not victorious, just steady. "Rome is whole," he says. 3 simple words, but they ripple through the army like a breaking wave. You feel something loosen inside your chest, something tight and knotted that's been there since the first rumors of rebellion months, years, maybe decades ago. The tension eases, the fear softens, the exhaustion becomes bearable. Rome is whole, or at least it can be again. Aurelian orders the city spared. No burning, no slaughter, no destruction. He praises Palmyra's beauty. He honors its culture. He respects its accomplishments. This, more than the victory itself, shocks the soldiers. You expected retribution. Instead, you get restraint. Zenobia had been captured days earlier, fleeing toward Egypt, intercepted by cavalry. Rumor has it she faced Aurelian with dignity. Rumor has it she negotiated her children's safety. Rumor has it she's alive, soon to be brought to Rome. Whatever the truth, her absence hangs over the city like a quiet refrain, a queen beaten but unbroken in legend. As the sun sets, Palmyra glows in soft orange light. Torches are lit. Orders settle into place. The legion begins the slow work of occupying without destroying. You find yourself sitting on a stone step, helmet beside you, exhaustion consuming every muscle. The air smells of dust and fading tension. Somewhere a fountain trickles, a sound so gentle after weeks of chaos it almost breaks you. Around you, soldiers talk in hushed, stunned voices. It's done. It's really done. He brought the East back. Aurelian, gods, he actually did it. You tilt your head back and stare at the sky, stars emerging one by one over a city reclaimed through grit, blood, and relentless determination. And you realize you've just witnessed something enormous, something history-changing, something your grandchildren will brag about even if you yourself never brag. Rome fractured, Rome suffered, Rome nearly died, but now under Aurelian's iron will, it begins to mend, stitch by stitch, stone by stone, battle by battle. And today, here in the heart of the desert, you watched the first threads pull tight again. No rest, no naps, no snacks. Aurelian turns west toward the breakaway Gallic Empire. You briefly consider running away to become a potter. You barely have time to blink after Palmyra's fall, before orders thunder through the camp like an angry deity's voice. The east is secured, yes, but Rome's western flank is still an open wound. The Gallic Empire, a whole breakaway state run by men who believed the crisis of the 3rd century was a perfect time for DIY nation-building, still exists. And Aurelian refuses to leave even one rebellious province standing. He wants the empire back in one piece. He wants the map to look symmetrical. He wants order. And you, unfortunately, are the feet making that happen. Before dawn, the army is already on the move. You're exhausted. Everyone is exhausted. Even the horses look like they want to file a complaint. But Aurelian strides at the head of the column, like a man clocking in for another day of fix everything myself because no one else can apparently. You whisper to the soldier beside you, do you think he gets tired? He shakes his head with certainty. No, he's fueled by rage and schedules. The desert gives way behind you as the legion pivots west, leaving the statues, palaces, and haunting beauty of Palmyra in the rising sun. Ahead lies a journey that feels longer than your entire childhood. You're marching from Syria all the way to Gaul, a route that makes you question the wisdom of wearing sandals for a lifestyle that involves crossing continents. The route takes you back through lands you've already suffered through, dusty plains, sun-baked paths, mountain passes, and cities that blur together in a haze of sweat, grit, and the army's signature ancient garlic musk. You trudge mile after mile until the scenery stops being scenery and becomes a repeating screensaver of misery. Aurelian does not slow the pace. If anything, he increases it. Your centurion explains this by saying, Aurelian hates rebellion the way normal people hate stepping on a nail. He wants it gone yesterday. On good days, you march for hours without interruption. On bad days, you march for more hours without interruption. There are no, let's take a break and appreciate the local landscape. The most you get is a 5-minute stop, during which you inhale water, shove food into your face, try not to collapse, and immediately begin moving again. Somewhere in Cappadocia, your cohort collectively snaps. Not mutiny. No one is suicidal, but emotional collapse, disguised as humor. A soldier says, I thought Rome was falling apart. Turns out my arches are falling apart faster. Another one mutters, my legs have detached from my body. I am marching through sheer spite alone. Someone else tries to convince everyone that if they play dead, maybe Aurelian will step over them and never notice. Aurelian absolutely would notice, because he notices everything. Whenever the line slows even slightly, he appears like a thundercloud materializing out of thin air. Faster, keep formation. We have 3 empires to fix by dinner. You want to ask if he means today's dinner or some metaphorical dinner centuries in the future, but you value your life too much. As the legion crosses Anatolia, the weather turns wild. The desert heat shifts into cold mountain winds that cut through your cloak like they have personal gripes against you. Rain falls sideways. Mud clings to your sandals so thickly you briefly consider amputating your own feet for convenience. One night, during a torrential downpour that turns the camp into a swamp, a soldier sighs, "I miss the sand." That's when you know morale is broken. But the march continues, through valleys full of wolves whose howls echo in the night, through forests where the canopy is so thick you forget what the sky looks like, through towns where locals stare at you like you're a suspicious caravan made entirely of weary zombies. Slowly, painfully, unbelievably, you approach the edges of the Gallic Empire, a patchwork kingdom cobbled together by Roman generals who decided the empire was too messy and opted for a spin-off series. The closer you get, the more stories you hear. The Gallic legions are tough. They've got their own emperor. They're actually organized. They drink too much beer. They think Rome is old-fashioned. They wear different uniforms, weird ones. They have standards now. Aurelian listens to these rumors and doesn't change expression. You can only assume the emotion he feels is something like, "Good, I was getting bored." The landscape shifts again. Dense forests, rolling hills, misty mornings, wet grass, damp air. Compared to the desert, it feels almost luxurious. You can breathe without swallowing sand. You can drink water that isn't preheated by nature. The wind doesn't try to exfoliate your skin off. The soldiers perk up slightly. "Gaul smells like mushrooms," someone says. "I can live with that." But you don't have long to enjoy it, because the scouts return with news. The Gallic forces are assembling. They know you're coming, and they're ready. Aurelian orders a halt. For the first time in weeks, you stop marching long enough to truly rest. As you slump onto a log, peeling your sandals off your throbbing feet, you stare across the misty fields of Gaul. Somewhere beyond those trees stand men who once saluted Rome and now salute someone else. It's unsettling, not like fighting barbarians, not like fighting desert rebels. This is fighting Romans who are not Roman anymore. Your centurion kneels beside you, checking his sword. "Tomorrow," he says quietly, "we face soldiers who know our tactics, our formations, our weaknesses." You gulp. "And we'll win," he adds, "because Aurelian doesn't lose." You look toward the emperor, who stands on a small rise studying the darkening horizon, cloak whipping in the wind. He looks tired. Truly tired, but also determined in a way that makes your spine straighten. He saved the East. Now he plans to save the West, and he's dragging all of you with him. You settle into your cloak, trying to ignore the ache in your bones, and watch the fog creep across the fields. Tomorrow, you march again. Tomorrow, Rome marches again, because Aurelian decided the empire is not done yet. And when Aurelian decides something, the rest of reality usually falls in line. The Gallic legions put up a fight, but Aurelian moves like a blade through smoke. Somehow, against every odd, the Western Empire collapses back into Rome's lap. The morning of the battle feels different, heavier, colder, more aware of itself. Mist clings to the ground in thick curls, shrouding the rolling Gallic fields in a ghostly veil. The soldiers stand in formation, quiet and tense. No jokes this time, no sarcasm. Even your centurion, the man who once said he hoped to die in combat because paperwork is worse, looks solemn. Because this time, you're not fighting barbarians. You're not fighting desert rebels. You're not fighting tribes who have never read a Roman drill manual. You're fighting Romans, or at least Romans who decided they could do the job better, and that is infinitely worse. Your shield feels heavier. Your sword feels smaller. Your heartbeat feels louder. On the other side of the field, the Gallic legions line up with brutal precision. Rows of shields glinting in the dawn light, their formation tight, their officers barking commands with voices honed by discipline. These men know every weakness in your playbook, because it used to be their playbook too. Aurelian rides along the Roman lines, his cloak cutting through the mist like a streak of burning iron. He says nothing for a long time, letting the silence thicken, letting the weight of what's about to happen settle into everyone's bones. Finally he speaks, not loudly, not theatrically, just enough for the nearest ranks to hear and repeat like a ripple passing through the formation. "Rome stands today." That's it, 4 words. But they punch straight through your chest, crack something open inside you, and pour resolve into the cracks. Aurelian turns his horse sharply, raises his hand in a simple gesture, and the battle begins. At first, the two lines advance like twin storms rolling toward each other, slow, deliberate, inevitable. You hear metal clatter, shields shift, boots pound the ground in synchronized thunder. As the mist thins, you see the Gallic front more clearly. Hardened faces, steady shoulders, men who have trained just as long and fought just as fiercely. You collide with them like a collapsing mountain. The first impact knocks the breath from your lungs. Shields slam together with the force of an earthquake. Spears thrust forward like a bristling wall of death. The Gallic legionaries push hard, coordinated, disciplined, relentless, and the Roman line buckles. For a moment you stumble back a step, and that moment stretches forever, filled with the terrifying knowledge that if you break formation, even slightly, the whole line could unravel. Your centurion roars, "Hold the line!" You shove forward again, teeth clenched, shield raised. The sound is pure chaos. Swords clanging, shields cracking, men grunting, boots scraping mud. Commands shouted in Latin, on both sides. The world narrows to the space in front of your shield, and the pounding of blood in your ears. A Gallic soldier lunges at you, his blade scraping across your shield and sending splinters flying. He shoves hard, and you dig your heels into the ground, fighting for balance. You counterstrike, feel your blade hit something, hear him grunt, then lose track of him in the swirl of bodies. Someone beside you goes down, someone else steps into his place. You don't even see their faces, just motion, muscle, instinct. It is terrifying. It is exhausting. It is endless. And then, like lightning splitting the sky, Aurelian charges. He doesn't wait for the perfect moment. He creates the perfect moment. His cavalry whips around the flank, slamming into the Gallic side with devastating force. Shields crumble. Formation cracks. Officers shout frantic orders you can't fully hear over the chaos. Aurelian cuts through the enemy line like he's personally offended by its existence. He strikes with precision, riding low in the saddle, sword flashing like white fire. His horse moves as if guided by divine instinct. He doesn't slow. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't falter. "Follow him!" your centurion yells, voice cracking from strain. And somehow, despite your muscles shaking and lungs burning, you do. The Roman line surges forward in a wave of fierce momentum. The Gallic soldiers fight hard, harder than anyone you've faced before, but panic spreads through them at the sight of Aurelians spearing through their ranks like a legend come to life. The tide shifts, slowly at first, then decisively. When one Gallic cohort begins to fall back, the others bend with them. Not a retreat, not yet, but the first real crack in their armor. Aurelian sees it instantly, signals the cavalry again, and they sweep around for another blow. The field becomes a storm of hoofbeats, shouting, clashing steel, and breaking resolve. You push forward with everything you have left: fear, pain, fatigue, all drowned out by the rising roar of Roman voices. Your shield arm goes numb, your sword feels too heavy, your breath comes in harsh gasps. But you don't stop. Not now. Not with victory so close you can taste it in your teeth. And then, suddenly, shockingly, the Gallic line breaks. Not in an elegant, orderly withdrawal, not with dignity. It breaks like a dam smashing open, men scattering, shields dropping, officers screaming for control. The collapse is absolute. You stand there, chest heaving, legs shaking, unable to comprehend it. The Gallic Empire, this formidable, stubborn, breakaway realm, is folding, surrendering, fading like mist under the morning sun. Not because they lacked discipline or courage, but because Aurelian refused to let anything stand against him. You watch their standards fall. You watch their troops throw down weapons. You watch officers kneel. It feels unreal. Your centurion exhales beside you, whispering, "By the gods, he did it again." The battlefield grows quiet in strange, uneven waves. First, the clatter of dropped weapons, then shouts of surrender, then silence. Aurelian rides through the aftermath, sword lowered, face grim with exhaustion. His armor is dented. His cloak is torn. He looks like he's been sculpted from pure willpower. You suddenly understand the miracle. It wasn't luck. It wasn't divine intervention. It wasn't chance. Rome won because Aurelian does not accept any universe in which Rome loses. As you stand in the wet grass of Gaul, surrounded by stunned soldiers and drifting mist, it hits you. He has done it. He has brought back the East. He has reclaimed the West. He has shattered rebellions, crushed empires, and restored the map. Rome, against all logic and probability, is whole again. And you're standing in the middle of history, sweat-soaked, bruised, traumatized, amazed. Aurelian sheathes his sword, looks across the field with those sharp, unbreakable eyes, and nods once. Miracles, you realize, do happen. They just tend to look suspiciously like hard work, exhaustion, and a very angry emperor. Rome erupts in celebration. People scream, cry, drink, and fall over, sometimes all at once. After years of chaos, they finally believe things might improve. You expect a warm welcome when you march back into the capital, maybe some applause, a few banners, perhaps a cheerful old lady waving a loaf of bread. What you do not expect is a level of celebration that can only be described as collective emotional detonation. The gates of Rome swing open and the city practically explodes at you. People flood the streets in such numbers that your formation immediately dissolves into a chaotic shuffle. Children climb on statues. Elderly men shout historical commentary at nobody in particular. Someone sets off what looks like an ancient confetti bomb made of flower petals and shredded tax receipts. The noise is indescribable. Cheering, singing, screaming, clapping, pan flute attempts, the distant and unmistakable sound of someone accidentally starting a small fire. You look around and think, ah yes, Rome is exactly as we left it, loud, crowded, and dangerously enthusiastic. Your cohort tries to maintain dignity, but dignity is difficult when a woman grabs your face and kisses your helmet, a merchant throws figs at you out of gratitude, a man tries to adopt you as his long-lost nephew. 3 people trip over the same paving stone at the same time. Someone shouts, "The Empire lives," while standing on a goat. This is not a parade. This is a city collectively losing its mind from joy. Because for years, Rome has been nothing but bad news. Emperor assassinated, frontier raided, province lost, new emperor assassinated, economy collapsing, plague, currency inflation so insane you need a wheelbarrow for groceries. Another emperor assassinated, civil war, barbarians, more civil war. Rome hasn't experienced good in decades. Rome barely remembers what okay feels like. So when Aurelian returns, having reunited the East, restored the West, crushed rebellions, defeated breakaway empires, and made the map look like a rectangle again, the city absolutely disintegrates into joy. You can hardly walk 10 steps without someone dumping flowers on you, offering you a drink, or shouting the phrase "restorer of the world" at Aurelian with the spiritual intensity of someone naming their newborn. The best part, Aurelian hates attention. He looks physically pained by celebration. He receives adoration the way most people receive surprise dental bills. When the crowd screams his new title, Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world, he does not bask in it. He nods awkwardly, raises a hand in a stiff wave, and immediately orders the army to maintain formation, which is absurd because the people of Rome are climbing the formation like it's a jungle gym. A baker hands him an entire loaf of honey bread. He blinks at it like it's a tactical problem. A child hands him a flower. He nods and looks alarmed. A group of senators praise him, bowing deeply. He looks like he wants to leave his own parade. You, on the other hand, are soaking in every moment. You haven't felt this appreciated since ever. You are a war-worn, sun-scorched, dust-infused survivor of multiple campaigns, and Rome is treating you like a celebrity. A man shouts, "This one looks like a hero!" You trip immediately. You pass by the forum, where the celebrations grow even wilder. A band of musicians is playing at least 3 different songs simultaneously. Romans dance in ways that might violate local laws of physics. Children chase each other with wreaths. Someone throws a jug of wine into the air in celebration, and it hits a statue with enough force to give Jupiter a concussion. Senators parade around in togas too fancy for the heat. One trips on his own hem and falls into a fountain. The crowd cheers anyway. A woman grabs your arm and demands, "Is Rome safe again?" You want to say yes, you really do, but Aurelian once said something about rebuilding the walls and fixing the currency and murdering corruption. So instead you say, "We're working on it." She hugs you so hard your ribs complain. As the army pushes deeper into the city, you realize something else. Rome is relieved, deeply, profoundly relieved. The people are not celebrating victory. They're celebrating the end of chaos. They're celebrating the idea that maybe finally the world isn't collapsing on top of them. They're celebrating survival. This celebration isn't for Aurelian alone. It's for themselves. The city's tension dissolves into laughter. Strangers embrace strangers. Tavern owners give out free samples. Wine flows like Rome is trying to refill the Tiber with alcohol. Somewhere, someone has spontaneously started a parade within the parade. Your fellow soldiers begin to loosen up. One accepts a wreath of olive branches and wears it proudly. Another juggles 3 apples to impress bystanders, drops them all, and still receives applause. Even the veterans, hardened by years of war, allow themselves small smiles. Then comes the moment everyone's been waiting for. Aurelian steps up onto the rostra, the great platform in the forum, and the entire city falls silent for the first time all day. Every eye turns to him, every voice hushes, every breath holds. Somewhere in the silence, a goat bleats, the silence deepens. Aurelian looks over the crowd with that familiar expression, part determination, part exhaustion, part, please don't make this weird. He doesn't give a long speech. He doesn't brag. He simply says, Rome lives, and the city erupts so violently in response that you actually take a step back. People scream, people cry, people hug until they fall over. Trumpets blast, wine spills everywhere. Someone releases a handful of doves that immediately poop on a senator. Rome hasn't felt alive in so long that it forgot how to celebrate calmly. So it celebrates loudly, wildly, catastrophically, beautifully. And as you stand there soaking it all in, the noise, the joy, the chaos, you feel something warm bloom in your chest. Hope for Rome, for the army, for yourself. For the first time in years, everything feels like it might actually be okay. Because Rome is whole, Rome is cheering, Rome is breathing again, and for once the future doesn't look like a storm. It looks like sunrise. Aurelian orders walls. Big walls, ridiculously big walls. You help haul stone until you lose feeling in your spine. You thought, foolishly, naively, adorably, that after reuniting the empire, the worst was over, that maybe the rest of your service would involve standing guard at a nice quiet gate, occasionally escorting senators, maybe enjoying a bath longer than 8 seconds. But no, absolutely not. Aurelian has returned to Rome with one terrifying mission: make the city unbreakable. And because he doesn't do anything halfway, he decides Rome needs walls, not polite little walls, not tasteful decorative walls, not just enough to keep opportunistic bandits out. No, he orders walls so massive that future centuries will assume giants built them. Walls that say, if you try to invade Rome again, you will regret every decision that led you here. The moment he announces the plan, the entire city reacts with a collective, wait, what? Rome hasn't built new walls in centuries. Rome is Rome, after all. Capital of the world, queen of cities, smug center of everything. Walls were for insecure provincial towns. Walls were for people who worried about threats. Rome's only defensive strategy for generations has been, be Rome and hope everyone else is intimidated. But Aurelian has seen too much chaos, rebellion, invasion, and existential dread to leave anything to hope. And so construction begins. You are immediately drafted into the workforce because apparently the Legion is now the world's most overqualified construction crew. Your first task, move stones, giant stones, stones so large they deserve names, stones that look like they were excavated from Mount Olympus itself. Your spine cries, your arms cry, your legs cry, and at one point, you're pretty sure your soul tries to exit your body just to escape the manual labor. Rome quickly transforms into a city buzzing with industry. Carpenters hammer frames for scaffolding. Masons carve blocks with practiced precision. Engineers sketch plans with quills that shake under Aurelian's intense supervision. Entire streets become obstacle courses of timber beams, stacked stone, rope coils, and extremely stressed workers. Dust coats everything: clothes, skin, food, pets, senators. If you see someone coughing in Rome during this period, you can safely assume it's because they inhaled half a wall. Your daily routine becomes wake up, lift stone, move stone, question life choices, lift more stone, listen to Aurelian shouting, higher, stronger, straighter. Get hit by someone else dropping a stone. Try not to drop your stone. Drop your stone anyway. Apologize. Lift another stone. Even the locals are pulled into the effort. Bakers carry bricks. Fishermen help dig foundations. Senators, actual senators, move gravel while muttering about how this is highly unusual, but not daring to say no. A few wealthy elites hire substitutes. But Aurelian hears about this and immediately abolishes the loophole, forcing everyone to contribute. Everyone. You hear a nobleman sigh, I haven't worked with my hands in my life. And your centurion mutters, and it shows, before handing him a shovel. The construction site becomes a social melting pot. Citizens, soldiers, slaves, merchants, artisans, everyone sweats together under the Roman sun. Everyone's temper grows short, everyone's back aches. But strangely, a sense of unity forms between the groaning, exhausted masses. You find yourself in conversations like, you think this wall will actually hold? Against what? Everything. No, hope so. Or, how tall is it supposed to be? Taller? What do you mean, taller? Aurelian looked at it and said, not tall enough. Aurelian is everywhere. He inspects every segment. He measures things with suspicious intensity. He checks mortar. He lifts stones himself just to prove he can. If he sees crooked masonry, he stares at the mason until the stone straightens out of fear. He once famously walked up to a half-built tower, squinted, and said, "This angle is wrong." The engineers panicked, recalculated, and realized he was correct by less than an inch. They still talk about it with haunted admiration. During one break, you overhear two workers whispering, "Why does he want the walls this big?" "Because the Goths exist." Oh, fair. The walls grow, day by day, week by week, rising like sleeping giants around the city. At first, they're nothing but trenches and foundations, then waist-high blocks, then towering sections that cast long shadows over the roads. Eventually, the structures become so imposing that walking beside them makes you feel like a small, confused insect. Rome changes. The skyline shifts, becoming harder, thicker, more fortified. Strangers arriving from the countryside stop and stare. "Is Rome expecting a war?" someone asks. "Rome always expects a war now," someone replies. And still, you lift stones. One afternoon, as you haul a massive block with 3 other soldiers, you look up and see Aurelian standing at the top of a rampart, wind whipping his cloak, dust swirling around him. He looks tired, truly, deeply tired, but satisfied, because these walls aren't just defenses, they're a statement, a promise, a declaration to the world. Rome will not fall. You push through another day of construction, feet throbbing, back screaming, arms shaking like leaves on a stormy tree. But as the cranes creak and the saws drone and the walls climb ever higher, something begins to settle in your chest. Security, stability, the faint idea of peace. Maybe, just maybe, Rome can breathe again. As night falls and you collapse beside a water trough, watching torchlight flicker off the fresh stonework, you finally understand Aurelian's vision. He isn't rebuilding walls, he's rebuilding trust in the empire, in the future, in the idea that Rome can survive anything, even itself. You run your hand over the rough stone beside you, feeling the weight of everything it represents. Aurelian saved the empire with battles. Now he's saving it with bricks. And you're saving your spine by lying down immediately. 22. Daily life under an emperor who actually works. For the first time in your life, the roads are safer, the borders stable, and the army competent. It's unsettling. You've grown used to disaster. You wake up one morning, stiff, sore, still dusted in construction rubble from hauling wall stones, and realize something truly bizarre. Nothing is on fire. Nothing is collapsing. No messenger is sprinting through the streets screaming about an invasion. No general has declared himself emperor for fun. No governor has defected to start a boutique mini-empire. No plague is sweeping the barracks. No barbarian horde is warming up in the distance. The world is calm, and honestly, you have no idea what to do with that. Daily life under Aurelian is, in a word, terrifying, but not for the usual reasons. Instead of chaos, uncertainty, an existential dread, you're confronted with the deeply unfamiliar sensation of competence at the highest level of government. No one warned you this could happen. For most of your adult years, being a Roman soldier has been like living inside a collapsing amphitheater. Dust everywhere, stones falling, everyone yelling, the exits blocked, the ushers crying. But with Aurelian in charge, suddenly Rome feels functional, which is deeply suspicious. The first major change is the roads. They're being repaired, actually repaired, not in the traditional Roman way where someone fills a hole with hopes and gravel before wandering off. Aurelian sends crews across the empire, patching, repaving, rebuilding bridges, clearing debris, and ensuring that travel doesn't feel like an Olympic event in ankle destruction. Merchants arrive in Rome raving about the improvements. "I made it from Mediolanum in record time. The bandits ran away when they saw patrols. I didn't even lose a wheel this time." You listen to these testimonials with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Good roads, safe travel, infrastructure that does not actively try to murder you? What kind of dystopian nightmare is this? Then there's the army, no longer a swirling disaster of underfunded, poorly trained, half-starved units scattered across random provinces. Under Aurelian, the legions transform into something uncomfortably close to professional. Daily drills, regular inspections, actual equipment maintenance, consistent pay. Consistent pay is the one that shocks you most. Soldiers are ecstatic. Men cry with joy. Officers gape at their accounts. One recruit faints when he realizes he can buy sandals without bartering emotional trauma for a discount. Of course, Aurelian's discipline is unrelenting. If anything, stability has made him even more demanding. He appears everywhere at once, inspecting food stores, checking garrison walls, interrogating quartermasters, ensuring supply lines stay open, revising tax codes, reorganizing provinces. At this point, you suspect the emperor may actually clone himself each morning, but you can't deny the effect. Banditry drops, border raids decrease, trade increases, rebel activity evaporates. The economy stops spiraling like a toddler with a stick. Even money starts to mean something again. Aurelian reforms the currency, removing the worthless coins that were basically metal-flavored lies and minting new, trustworthy ones. Merchants rejoice. Citizens cautiously test the coins by biting them, nodding in approval when their teeth meet actual silver instead of disappointment. Suddenly, Rome feels like a place where the world makes sense, where you can plan more than 2 hours into the future without expecting catastrophe, where you can walk through the forum without tripping over a political riot. And honestly, it's freaking you out. You've grown accustomed to unpredictability. Chaos is comfortable. Crisis makes sense. Now that the empire is functioning, you find yourself on high alert, scanning the horizon for disasters that don't arrive. Your fellow soldiers feel the same. One day, while lounging near a fountain, luxury, a friend mutters, "Something's wrong." You glance around. What? It's been quiet for days. So clearly something horrible is about to happen. You nod. It's the only logical explanation. Even citizens struggle to adjust. Rome erupts in celebration at random intervals simply because people no longer fear invaders breaking through the unwalled city. Tavern owners hang banners reading, "Thank you, Aurelian." Markets expand. Farmers bring in better harvests. Bakers experiment with recipes without worrying their ovens will be seized for military use. Life is improving. It's unnerving. When you walk through Rome, you see signs everywhere of Aurelian's influence. New wall segments rising like stone giants, freshly paved streets connecting neighborhoods, better lighting along major roads, armed patrols that actually patrol, citizens walking with something dangerous in their eyes. Hope. The city doesn't just feel safer, it feels alive again. One afternoon, you're standing on the Aurelian walls during your shift, watching children chase each other in the streets below. Their laughter drifts upward with the warm air. Merchants haggle, musicians play, bakers shout about honey cakes. The sun gleams off the rooftops like Rome is trying to show off. Your centurion walks up beside you, crosses his arms and sighs. "You know," he says, "it's strange. I don't know how to function without disaster." You nod. "Same," he continues. "Aurelian's making the world make sense again." He pauses. "I'm not sure I trust him for that." You laugh, because it's too true. But deep down, beneath the suspicion, beneath the muscle memory of years of chaos, beneath the constant expectation of doom, something starts to take root. Gratitude. Aurelian didn't just fix provinces. He didn't just win battles. He didn't just repair roads or build walls. He gave Rome something it hadn't had in decades. A break, a chance to breathe, a moment to live instead of survive. And as you lean against the warm stone of the new walls, watching your city bustle with life instead of fear, you realize something else. You're not waiting for disaster anymore. You're waiting for the future. And for once, you're not afraid of it. Currency stabilized, corruption crushed, chaos minimized. Aurelian approaches empire management like a frustrated parent cleaning a teenager's room, disgusted but determined. You never expected to witness an emperor treating the empire itself like a giant, messy household in need of aggressive spring cleaning. But that is exactly what Aurelian does. The moment the major rebellions are crushed and the borders stop screaming, he turns inward, toward Rome, its provinces, its economy, its institutions, and rolls up his metaphorical sleeves. You half expect him to announce, "Everyone out, we're doing a deep clean," before flipping over the entire government like a mattress. Because the empire, it's a disaster. Decades of crisis have left everything tangled, dusty, sticky, and possibly haunted. Money means nothing. Grain shipments vanish mysteriously. Tax collectors are either corrupt or terrified. The military is overworked and underpaid, and half of Rome's officials have been bribed more times than they've eaten breakfast. Aurelian looks upon this chaos with the disdain of a man who has personally had enough. And then he begins. First, the currency. It is not an exaggeration to say that Rome's money has been more counterfeit than actual coin for years. Soldiers complain about being paid in glorified tin tokens. Merchants weigh coins suspiciously, test them with their teeth, and occasionally burst into tears. Aurelian decides to fix this immediately. He introduces new coins, properly minted, carefully weighted, silver content restored. He recalls the junk coins from circulation, and replaces them with money people can actually use without feeling scammed. Merchants celebrate. Bankers faint with relief. Your cohort stares at their new pay and whispers, "It's shiny." For the first time in your life, your wages don't feel like props from a theater production about poverty. Next, corruption. Aurelian does not tolerate corruption at all, not even a little bit. He hunts it down like it personally offended him. Governors who stole grain, fired. Tax officials who pocketed fees, dragged to court. Military officers misusing funds, gone. Senators cutting shady deals, investigated immediately. You watch entire administrative offices suddenly clean themselves overnight because Aurelian is rumored to be doing surprise inspections. One senator, upon hearing the emperor was nearby, nervously swept his own floor and hid incriminating scrolls inside a bread oven. Aurelian walked in, sniffed once, and said, "Burn it." You never saw a man sweat that much. Then, the bureaucracy. Rome's governmental system had become so tangled that no one knew who reported to whom. Aurelian reorganizes departments like a furious file clerk. He redraws provinces. He appoints reliable administrators. He streamlines communication so orders don't take 6 months to reach a frontier fort. You see clerks running through the forum carrying stacks of new policy tablets. You see dismissed officials crying in corners. You see newly appointed governors faint when they receive assignments, as if the responsibility itself is a physical blow. Empire management, Aurelian mutters one day, should not be this difficult. You resist the urge to applaud. He fixes the grain supply next. Rome depends on grain shipments like a modern office depends on coffee. Without it, everything collapses into chaos. For years, the shipments have been erratic thanks to piracy, mismanagement, and governors who treated grain like their personal snack fund. Aurelian reestablishes secure supply routes, cracks down on theft, and reorganizes storage facilities. Soon the grain arrives predictably, the prices stabilize, and the famously irritable Roman mob becomes noticeably less mob-like. A baker once told you, "It feels strange. I haven't been threatened in weeks." Progress, and then religion. This one is controversial. The empire has a complicated relationship with religion. Dozens of gods, cults, local traditions, imported deities, and the occasional emperor who believes he's divine. There's a lot happening. Aurelian decides to unify things a bit, not erase old beliefs, just create a stabilizing symbol. He promotes the worship of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, as a kind of unifying imperial presence. To you and most soldiers, this means more festivals, more rituals, more sun symbols everywhere. To Aurelian, it means order, and honestly, it works better than expected. People respond to clarity. You see more unity, fewer street arguments about divine jurisdiction, and a surprising number of sun-shaped pastries. But the biggest reform, discipline. Aurelian expects the same discipline in Rome that he demands from the army. This includes refunding military pensions, resupplying frontier forts, reorganizing the Praetorian Guard, which is basically babysitting very stabby toddlers, punishing officers who slack, strengthening provincial defenses, rebuilding roads, creating supply depots so the empire no longer depends on luck. Rome hasn't run this smoothly in decades, and yet it's intimidating. Aurelian walks through the city like a man checking off chores on a cosmic list. He appears at courts, docks, granaries, workshops, frontier gates, temples. People freeze when they see him, straighten their posture, hide their bribes, stop slacking, and suddenly act like the model citizens they've never been. Under his rule, daily life becomes predictable, structured, stable. No sudden uprisings, no surprise invasions, no emperors murdered at breakfast, no provinces declaring independence for fun. It's almost boring, and that's what scares you. One afternoon, you're standing near a market stall, watching a tax collector actually follow the law. You blink in confusion. A merchant beside you mutters, "This is unnatural." Another replies, "I blame Aurelian." But there's something remarkable happening beneath the confusion and adjustment. People feel safe. For the first time in a generation, citizens walk the streets at night without fear. Markets brim with goods. Farmers sell their harvests without bribing a guard. Children play freely. Senators debate policy instead of plotting coups. Rome is working, and in the midst of this functional empire, this new era of order and responsibility, Aurelian stands like a pillar, stern, relentless, unyielding, and weirdly comforting. He is not warm, he is not gentle, he is not fun, but he is exactly what Rome needed. A parent cleaning a teenager's room, disgusted, frustrated, muttering about filth, but determined to make it livable again. And as you watch Rome grow calmer, safer, cleaner, stronger. You feel something you haven't felt in years. Trust. Aurelian isn't just fixing the empire, he's giving it back its future. Just when peace feels real, Aurelian heads out again. One last campaign. You follow, unaware of the twist waiting ahead. It begins quietly, too quietly. Rome has settled into the strange, unfamiliar rhythm of stability, and you've started to believe the unthinkable, that life might continue like this, that Aurelian might finally take a break, that maybe you'll spend the next year standing on a peaceful wall, eating olives that don't taste like stress, and watching the sunset without wondering if the empire is on fire somewhere. Then one morning, a horn blows in the forum, and everything changes. Whispers sweep through the city like wind over tall grass. Aurelian is leaving again. Another campaign. Another mission, another march. No one knows the details at first. Rumors spin like drunken acrobats. Some say it's a minor frontier issue. Others claim a rebellious governor is acting suspicious. A few insist Aurelian just gets twitchy if he stays in one place too long. You gather with other soldiers at the barracks, tension humming in the air. Didn't we just fix everything? Someone grumbles. Another replies, maybe he found something else broken. A third whispers, I heard it's Persia this time. Everyone goes silent at that one. Not Persia. Please, not Persia. But when Aurelian finally appears, armored, focused, radiating purpose, you know the truth. It doesn't matter where you're going. If Aurelian is marching, you are marching too. Orders are read aloud. No panic, no crisis. Just a suspiciously vague expedition east to address administrative irregularities in the province of Thrace. Administrative irregularities is imperial code for someone doing something stupid. Aurelian hates stupid. The army prepares to move once again. You pack your gear with a familiar heaviness. The routine is the same, but the feeling is different. This isn't the frantic stress of war or the desperate rush to save a collapsing empire. This is something quieter, like tying up loose ends, like cleaning the last corner of a room after hours of sweeping. You march out of Rome slowly, almost reluctantly. The city's new walls rise behind you like a protective giant, gleaming in the sunlight. Citizens wave from the gates. Children run alongside the column. Merchants shout blessings. A few senators nod stiffly, relieved not to be dragged along. Rome feels safe now, so why doesn't your heart? The march begins smoothly. The weather cooperates. Supply lines function. Aurelian keeps the pace reasonable. A miracle in itself. You travel through familiar landscapes, rolling fields, quiet forests, repaired bridges, villages newly thriving under peace. Everywhere you go, people recognize the emperor. They cheer, they offer food, they call him Restitutor Orbis, restorer of the world. Aurelian accepts these greetings with small nods, always ready to move on. He seems thoughtful lately, less sharp, less iron, not tired. Aurelian never truly gets tired, but weighed down by something you can't quite name. At campfires he speaks less, he listens more, he stares at maps long after others sleep. Sometimes he walks alone at dawn, watching the horizon as if waiting for an answer. The army senses it too. One evening, as you sharpen your sword, a fellow soldier says, "Feels strange this march." "How?" you ask. "Like a story nearing its end." You don't respond. You can't, because you feel it too. That quiet tightening in your chest, that sense of being on the edge of something you can't see. As the days lengthen, the land grows rougher, the paths narrower. Thracian hills rise like jagged teeth. You pick up speed, Aurelian speed, as the emperor becomes increasingly restless. When you reach the provincial headquarters, the problem becomes clearer. Corruption. Not ordinary corruption, stupid corruption. A clerk forging documents, a military official embezzling funds, a governor turning a blind eye to smuggling. Aurelian's least favorite things, all concentrated into one administrative swamp. The emperor handles it the only way he knows how. Swiftly, thoroughly, without flinching. Trials, dismissals, replacements. The bureaucracy is cleaned with surgical efficiency. You can practically hear the paperwork screaming in fear. But then something happens, something small, something quiet, something that begins like a rumor, a whisper, a warning. Aurelian has enemies, real enemies, within his own ranks. You don't notice it at first. The sideways glances, the hushed conversations, the tense meetings among officers. But the signs grow sharper. Aurelian's reforms, his discipline, his crackdown on corruption, these made him respected by many and hated by others, and hatred, when mixed with fear, becomes dangerous. The twist arrives on a crisp autumn morning. You're striking camp when word spreads through the ranks like wildfire. Aurelian is gone. Not gone, but taken, betrayed, cut down by a plot within his own staff. At first you refuse to believe it. Aurelian, the unstoppable force of nature, the man who stared down rebellion, barbarian invasions, desert empires, civil wars, an administrative incompetence, undone by treachery, impossible. But the truth hits you with brutal clarity when an officer rides out, pale and shaking, voice cracking as he confirms it. Aurelian has fallen. The world tilts. You sit down hard, unable to breathe. Around you, soldiers stare at the ground, stunned, hollow, broken. Some sob, some curse, some simply shut down. The sky feels wrong. The air feels wrong. The entire universe feels like it has made a mistake. Because Aurelian wasn't just an emperor. He was the empire's spine, its storm, its order, its fury, its hope. Without him, everything feels suddenly fragile. The news spreads to the provinces, to Rome, to the frontier. Everywhere Aurelian's reforms had taken root, the earth trembles. But something else happens too. Shock turns to sorrow. Sorrow turns to reverence. Reverence turns to unity. People weep openly in the streets. Soldiers hold vigils by torchlight. Even senators, those eternal political cats, mourn with genuine grief. For the first time in a generation, Rome grieves not because it has lost an emperor, but because it has lost a leader. And you sit by the side of the Thracian road, staring at the dust rising from the empire he saved. The empire that betrayed him, and the empire that will now have to stand on its own. The final march you never expected has ended, not in battle, not in glory, but in silence. And in that silence, you understand something profound. Aurelian didn't just restore Rome, he taught it how to move forward, even without him. 25. The emperor's end, and the fragile peace he leaves behind. Aurelian falls not in battle, but to conspiracy. You stand in stunned silence, realizing Rome just lost the one man holding everything together. The empire is whole again. But for how long? The news doesn't hit like thunder. It hits like the absence of thunder, a quiet, unnatural stillness that sweeps through the camp and hollows out the air. One moment you're tightening your sandals, preparing for another day of marching. The next, you're staring at officers with pale faces, shaky hands, and voices so thin you can barely hear them over the rustling leaves. Aurelian is gone, not in a glorious clash, not in a dramatic final speech, not in the blaze of battle everyone expected from a man whose entire life was a confrontation with chaos. He falls to whispers, he falls to fear, he falls to the knives of men too small to understand his vision. You sink to the ground, knees buckling under the weight of it. It feels impossible, ridiculous even, that someone like Aurelian could die from something as mundane as a conspiracy. This was the emperor who outran disaster, who broke rebellious kingdoms like twigs, who personally stared down threats that would have made lesser rulers faint into their decorative togas. But now he's gone, and the world feels wrong. Around you, soldiers move as if underwater. No one shouts, no one calls for order, no one knows what to do. The army has always been Aurelian's, his will, his force, his fury made flesh. Without him, you're a body without a heartbeat. A veteran collapses on a tree stump whispering, "He survived everything except us." Someone else murmurs, "The gods must hate Rome." Another just sits in the dirt and cries, not loudly, not theatrically, but with the soft, broken sobbing of someone who has finally lost the last thread holding them together. Word spreads outward like a shockwave, first through the camp, then through the nearby towns, then across the provinces like dark birds carrying unwelcome omens. Each region reacts differently. In the east, merchants close their stalls. In the west, farmers pause mid-harvest. In the north, soldiers stare at their shields as if seeing them for the first time. In the south, priests light incense for a soul too great for a single pyre. Rome hears last. But when the news reaches the capital, the reaction is immediate and universal. People pour into the streets in stunned disbelief. Grief washes through the city like a flood, carrying everything in its wake. You hear stories later, a baker dropping an entire tray of bread, a senator sitting down so hard he snapped his own chair, a child asking why the sun felt dimmer. Aurelian wasn't loved for his charm. He didn't have any. He wasn't loved for his kindness. He didn't have much of that either. He was loved because he fixed what everyone else broke. He was loved because he did the impossible. And suddenly, the impossible is gone. You continue marching, but without direction. Officers argue quietly. Strategies evaporate. Plans fall apart. Everything feels unmoored. You've followed this man across deserts, mountains, battlefields, collapsing provinces, and political nightmares. You've trusted him with your life because he always knew where to go. Now, for the first time in years, no one knows anything. That night, the camp doesn't sleep. Torches burn until sunrise. Men sit in small circles, telling stories, not of battles or victories, but of the little things. The way Aurelian inspected armor himself, the way he walked the lines in silence, the way he always carried maps like extensions of his own mind, the way he never let anyone slack, but also never let anyone feel alone. You find yourself talking, too, about the dust of Palmyra, the mud of Gaul, the long roads, the impossible speed of his marches, the way he always moved forward, even when the world was falling sideways. At some point, as the fire crackles low, your centurion says, "He gave us Rome back." After a pause, he adds, "But Rome doesn't know what to do with gifts." You can't argue. Eventually, new orders arrive, hazy, uncertain, issued by men who tremble under the weight of their own authority. The army turns back toward Rome, not in triumph, but in mourning. The march home feels longer than any campaign you've ever endured. Every step sounds like a drumbeat in a funeral procession. When you finally see the Aurelian walls, proud, towering, defiant, your chest tightens. They rise like the last great monument to a man who built entire nations out of stubborn will. They stand because he stood, and now they are orphans too. Rome welcomes you, not with cheers, but with silence. People gather along the streets, holding candles, laurel leaves, symbols of the sun God he favored. Priests chant blessings. The Senate issues proclamations dripping with regret, though you're not sure how much of it is genuine. Still, something remarkable happens. There is no rebellion, no immediate collapse, no sudden fragmentation. Rome holds, shakily, uneasily, fearfully, but it holds. Aurelian's reforms, his infrastructure, his currency, his walls, his discipline, his clarity, they run so deep that not even his enemies can undo them overnight. You realize, with a small aching swell of pride, that he didn't just restore the empire, he restored its ability to survive him. In the weeks that follow, statues rise in his honor, soldiers speak his name in reverence, citizens call him a legend, and you walk the streets of Rome and feel him everywhere, in the safety, in the order, in the quiet confidence returning to the people, in the stones of the walls he forced you to build until your arms gave out. He is gone, but his work remains. Still, the peace is fragile. You can feel it trembling like a glass balancing on the edge of a table. One bad emperor, one foolish law, one opportunistic general could shatter everything he fought for. And that is the tragedy of Rome. It lives on the knife's edge of brilliance and catastrophe. As you stand before his new statue, stern, tired, unyielding even in marble, you place your hand on the cold stone and whisper a promise you're not sure he can hear. We'll try to keep it together. We'll try to be worthy of what you rebuilt. Because if Aurelian taught you anything, it's this: Rome never survives on luck. It survives on will, on discipline, on stubborn, relentless work. And though the empire mourns, though the future trembles, though the world feels suddenly heavier, Aurelian's Rome is still standing, for now.